you're here. Please. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God you're here. Help me, I've been shot. What? No, not you! Stay away from me! Please, no! Stay away from me! Please.
Famous for its beaches and boating canals, Fort Lauderdale, Florida is an outdoor lover's paradise. And for Connecticut native Christine Kent, there's no place else like it.
I moved to Fort Lauderdale about 30 years ago. I had come here on vacation and just fell in love with the area. I saw myself eventually getting married and having a family here and settling down. It's just a beautiful place to live.
The outgoing 38-year-old spends her weekdays working at a doctor's office.
Dr. Grady's office, this is Christine. Hi, Mr. Hasty, how are you? Good. Uh-huh.
I worked in a doctor's office that helped patients with their pain management.
Well, how does 2:30 work for you?
We had a lot of patients that would come in that were regulars, and some of the patients were really warm and friendly, and it was a pleasure to treat them and help them to feel better.
Yeah, that's so sweet. I look forward to seeing you too. Okay, take care. Bye. Hi, can I help you?
I sure hope so. I hurt my back a couple days ago. Normally it gets better on its own, but it's just not this time.
Okay. Let me see what I can do. Well, today's your lucky day. We have a cancellation. If you can wait just about a half hour, I can get you in.
Hey, that's great.
If you can just head over there and fill out these forms, that'd be great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
When I met Alan Sinclair at the doctor's office, he seemed very nice, just a shy, quiet, kind of boyish personality.
How'd it go?
Great.
Good.
Gave me some anti-inflammatories and wants me to come back in 2 days for more therapy.
Fantastic. How does 11 a.m. on Thursday work?
That works.
Great.
Or how about 7 p.m. tonight? Dinner at Torino's?
Unfortunately, Dr. Grady really frowns upon employees dating patients.
What does he know? He's just a doctor.
He is a pretty big stickler.
So you're saying I should find a different therapist?
I think it would be best for your back and my job for us to keep it professional. Don't you?
Okay, yeah.
Well, we will see you at 11 a.m. on Thursday. And if you have any questions or problems, please don't hesitate to call us.
Okay.
All right, have
thanks.
a great day.
Yeah, you too.
See you soon. Bye.
I was very flattered, but it was against policy for me to date any of the patients. So I could not accept his invitation to get together outside of the office. He wasn't really my type anyway.
In addition to working at the doctor's office full-time, Christine moonlights as a model on the weekends.
And as you may already know, it's really quite simple. You just take one of your dirty casings, drop it in the tumbler.
I was able to do a lot of modeling through different agencies and different events and convention shows. One was the Gun and Knife Show in Fort Lauderdale.
Choose your media. You can use either walnut hull or corncob. A couple hours in the tumbler and voila. Well, thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any questions, you know where to find me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
At the Gun and Knife Show, I was a promotional model. And the percentage of the consumers at these shows were a lot more men in particular.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, you're fine, honey. That's my fault. In fact, you can bump into me anytime. I've met you before, haven't I?
I do work a lot of gun shows.
Yeah, I don't think I forget legs like those.
I would often have men just coming up to me to talk with me and hang around the booth just to chat with me and try to work a conversation with me. It made me a little uneasy. I wasn't very comfortable with it.
Hey, Alan. Hi.
I didn't know you were working this show.
Oh yeah, I am the expert on tumblers.
Well, I gotta go, but maybe I'll bump into you somewhere else.
Thank you for saving me. That guy was coming on way too strong.
Glad I could help. So, tell me about your Tumblr.
Alan came to, I think, 2 or 3 of these shows while I was working, and he just stopped by the booth and he would linger around and talk with me for a little bit.
Final product.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
It is pretty special.
Hey, that guy from before seemed kind of sketchy. You don't think he's one of those stalker types, do you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
How about I come back at the end of the show? I can escort you to your car. Maybe we could even grab a drink or something.
Sure, that'd be great.
The last time I saw him at the Gun and Knife show, he was no longer being treated at the doctor's office. And I thought, well, what's the harm in it? He seems like a nice guy. So I ended up accepting his invite. It seemed okay.
Sure. Some of the gun show guys are tough, but let's see them stand in high heels for 8 hours.
After the gun show, Alan and Christine meet up as planned.
Hey, I know a great spot where we can grab a drink. Why don't we take my car? I'll drop you back here when we're done.
Sure, works for me. Thank you.
But when they arrive at their destination, Christine realizes that Alan's idea of grabbing drinks is much different from hers.
I thought we'd go somewhere by the beach and sit and talk and have a drink and just chat. The next thing I know, he planned this whole elaborate date.
I thought we were going to a bar.
Well, picnic in a park is better than a drink in a noisy bar.
And to my surprise, he packed a picnic basket with a blanket, a bottle of wine, some snacks. This is not at all what I was expecting. He kind of blindsided me. And I thought, well, this is awkward. I went along with it because I didn't want to be rude.
Oh, wow, you thought of everything.
I certainly try. There we go.
Thank you.
2 gun show stalkers.
Oh.
If it wasn't for that guy, we wouldn't be here. Come on. We should dance.
No, thank you.
Come on.
Really, I really just think we should be friends.
Fine. Come on. Drive you back to your car.
It's almost like a switch had been flipped. He got instantly angry, and he just poured out the wine glasses and started packing up everything. I don't think he said 2 words to me the whole way back, but I was so glad to be dropped off. I was relieved.
After their disastrous picnic, Christine doesn't see or hear from Alan for almost a year. But on a trip to the hardware store, she unexpectedly comes face to face with him again.
Christine,
Alan, hey, you work here now?
for about 6 months. It's easier on my back.
Oh, that's great.
Doing some gardening, I see.
Trying to. It's a big project. I kind of want to do something to spruce up the carport, you know, maybe put in some flower boxes. It's just, they're so expensive.
I can build you some.
You can?
Piece of cake.
I don't want to trouble you.
I'd be happy to. Friend to friend.
Okay, sure.
If I hurt my back, I know who to call.
It was really nice of him to offer to lend a hand. He worked in the lumber department, so I figured he was very capable. So I accepted his offer.
A few days later, Alan and Christine are working in her garden when Christine's friend Emily drops by for a visit.
Hey, Emily. Hey, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. Those planters are beautiful. Yeah, my friend Alan built them for me. Oh.
Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Emily?
Yeah. You have some serious skills. I'd love to get your help with something like that. I would love some planners like that.
I'd be happy to help you.
That sounds great. How much would you charge for a couple of hours?
Oh, don't worry about it. So you get the friend rate.
I was happy that he was willing to help her out. They got together, he helped her with a few things, and they actually ended up dating for 3 months.
Several weeks later, a hurricane approaches South Florida, and once again, Alan offers Christine a helping hand.
We need to get all your windows boarded up. Do you have hurricane shutters?
Oh, no, I don't.
Well, we need to get you some.
Okay. Did you want to come inside?
Yeah, sure. Let me grab my tools.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
We had several hurricanes that season, and I needed some help getting my house prepared. There was nobody I could really count on or depend on to come help me, so I was so relieved and very grateful for his help.
But while a hurricane looms outside, things are about to get stormy inside, too.
That's the last of them.
You are a lifesaver. Looks like you could use this. Oh my God, your arm.
It's just a scrape.
No, if you get infected. Here, 1 sec. Here. Is that okay?
Yeah.
How's that?
Good.
I didn't have a steady boyfriend per se, but while he was there helping me prepare for the hurricane, a guy that I was dating stopped by to make sure that I was all right.
Hey. What's going on here?
When Christine Kent accepts Alan Sinclair's offer to hurricane-proof her house, it seems like a harmless decision. But it's not.
What's going on here? Sorry, am I interrupting something?
So when this other guy that I had been dating stopped by to see if I was all right, it was a little bit uncomfortable.
Alan was helping me prepare for the storm, and he scraped his arm. I told you about Alan. He used to be a patient, the one dating Emily.
Right. Right. Bob Carter. Nice to meet you. These storm shutters you installed look terrific. I just finished my house. Came down to see if you need some help.
Thank you.
Looks like I beat you to it.
Alan seemed a little jealous. He seemed not very happy that somebody else came by to help me.
Let me walk you out.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
At that moment, I felt kind of bad. I didn't want him to get the wrong idea, like I had used him.
Alan. Hey. Hey. I can't thank you enough for this. I really couldn't have done it without you.
Sure you could have. You could have asked Bob to do it. In fact, if I had known you had a boyfriend, I wouldn't have even stopped by and wasted half a day.
You're right. You're right. I really should have asked Bob. But I'm really grateful to have a friend like you.
He offered to help me as a friend. It really wasn't his place to be jealous or upset, but I felt kind of bad the way the whole situation ended up.
Weeks after Alan's angry departure, Christine bumps into her friend Emily.
Christine! Emily, hi! Hey! How are you?
I'm good. What's up with you?
Oh, not much. You know, the usual.
Yeah?
How's Alan? I haven't seen him in a while.
Alan. Actually, we broke up.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I didn't really see us going anywhere, so I told him I didn't think we had a future, and he got really angry and stormed out of the house. Yeah, I haven't heard from him since.
They kind of broke up rather abruptly. From what she told me, he had some sort of intimacy issues. And my friend just tried to have a conversation with him one day to try to resolve this intimacy issue they were having, and there was no resolving it.
I mean, I did try to call him a few times, say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But he never called me back.
He seemed humiliated and angry with her, and he kind of hastily, angrily stormed out on her, and he would never talk to her again after that. She tried to call him several times over a few days, and he wouldn't have any contact with her anymore. And that was the end of their relationship.
And then I got a call, get this, from his mother, asking me to stop calling him.
What?
Yeah.
Alan was in his late 30s, so both my friend and I thought that was really weird that his mother would call her to tell her have no more contact with her son and to leave him alone. It was very, very odd.
Several years go by, and Christine has zero contact with Alan, but her modeling jobs still make her a target for unwanted attention.
So the Gun and Knife Show was 3 times a year.
You can use either Walnut Hull or Corncob Media. Drop the casings in and let it do the work for you.
And a lot of the same faces, a lot of the same people would come back, repeat customers.
And so it usually takes about... It usually takes about 6 to 8 hours. And if you add polish, you can cut that time in half.
It wasn't always enjoyable to have some of these guys that might appear rather creepy kind of hit on me. But I would often just brush it off.
But some unwelcome advances are harder to shake than others.
Well, look who it is.
I'm sorry.
Don't be.
Excuse me.
No worries. We do seem to keep bumping into each other.
Yeah, we do. Have a nice day. Excuse me.
These days, there's only one man Christine is interested in flirting with.
Hey,
Nice.
I was in a good relationship that seemed very promising with a guy that I was very much in love with. We talked about having children, starting a family. So I was very hopeful for my future.
You are going to make a terrific husband to a very lucky woman one day.
Any idea who that lucky woman might be?
Oh, yeah. I think I know her really well. Remember the guy I was telling you about? The creep from the gun show?
Aren't they all kind of creepy?
I'm serious. I saw him again at the ATM.
So?
I think he might be stalking me.
Look, aren't you the one that's always telling me that you see these gun show people around town all the time?
Yeah.
He just stands out because he's extra creepy. It's just a coincidence, okay?
Okay. You're probably right.
Want some food?
Yes, I'm starving.
A few months later, Christine wraps up another modeling gig and heads out into the night.
Okay, bye. I'll see you at the show in Miami next month. Drive safe.
But as she waits for her ride home, she's not alone.
Hey, Chris. I'm running a few minutes behind. I'm so sorry. Be there soon, though. Love you. Bye.
What a surprise.
The show's already over.
I didn't come for the show.
Hey.
Hey. Sorry I'm late.
No, you are just on time.
What's wrong?
Nothing.
Later that summer, Christine arrives home to an empty house.
I went out for dinner with an old friend and then did my weekly grocery shopping and came back home from the store and was putting my groceries away. And there was a knock at the door. And I thought, well, that's odd. It's 10:30 at night. I'm not expecting anybody. Who could that possibly be?
Christine Kent thinks she's home alone for the night, until an uninvited guest shows up at her doorstep.
Hey,
Alan, hi. What are you doing here? I haven't seen you in so long.
Well, I was just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by and say hi.
Certainly, I don't like somebody dropping by unannounced. It made me a little uncomfortable, but he was a friendly person from my past, a friendly acquaintance who had been helpful, and I was just trying to be polite.
How's your back?
Still good. I was living out of town for a little bit. Started doing photography.
Oh, that's great.
I actually just shot this air show. I'd love to show you the photos, if you have a second.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Great. All right, I'll grab my laptop.
Sure.
Okay.
I felt it would have been rude of me if I didn't invite him in. I figured, it couldn't take more than a few minutes.
Wow. These are really amazing. How did you get so close to that plane?
Well, I have a telephoto lens. Sorry, it's like...
Oh.
it's on.
Makes sense.
I looked at all of the pictures on the slideshow and complimenting him on every one. They were very well taken. And the slideshows just started to repeat. And at that moment, he stood up abruptly and he said, "Oh, excuse me a moment, I have to get something."
Hang on a second, there's something else. I'll show you.
Okay.
I mean, God, I could just keep watching these all over. They're so good.
The next thing I know, he's standing behind me, and I heard, all of a sudden, I had a gun pressed to my head with his right hand. And I was terrified.
Don't turn around.
Alan, what are you doing?
Put your head down on the sofa.
What?
Just
Why?
do it.
I saw my life flash before my eyes, and I saw a horrible scene of my blood and brain matter splattered all over the wall, and I thought, this is not how I want to go out.
Shouldn't have done that.
I have to try anything to save my life. I have to try to get out of this situation.
What's wrong? Something's wrong. Let me help you. Do you need a hug? Here, let me give you a hug. Alan, talk to me. I can help.
And I kept talking and talking, and the whole time I was inching forward, trying to get toward my door to get out of there.
This is not the answer, okay? I am your friend, Alan. I want to help. Tell me what I can do to help, please. Please tell me what I can do.
And as I'm inching toward him, he's inching back.
I am so glad you came tonight. I haven't seen you in so long. I thought maybe you had moved away. Alan, I don't know what's wrong, but this is not right. God loves you. He loves you so much. We are both so special in God's eyes. You and me.
And I'm reaching over, trying to unlock my door, and I couldn't open it because he had locked my deadbolt when I was putting my groceries away. So I'm trying to unlock it without taking my eyes off of his.
God does not want you to hurt me, Alan. Alan, you know that. Alan, I am your friend.
I unlocked it, and he reached over me and locked it again. And I said to myself, he's not gonna let me out of here.
Alan.
And for that split second, I had the thought of trying to kick him really hard, but I was afraid of getting shot in the chest at point blank range, so I kept talking to him.
Alan, God loves you.
I was able to swing the door open, and I ran, and I screamed help as loud as I could.
Help!
In that moment, he panicked, and he opened fire. The first bullet went through the middle of my right foot, and the second bullet blasted right through my spine, through the middle of my back.
Help! Somebody, please! Help me! No, please! Help me! Help me, please! Somebody, please help me!
I couldn't move anything from my chest down. I was helpless, and I was terrified.
Help!
But for Christine, the worst is yet to come.
Please help!
I thought to myself, oh dear God, this can't get any worse.
Help me! Help! Please, somebody, please, God, please.
But Alan's reign of terror remains far from over.
After Christine was shot, the assailant ran back into the house and grabbed his laptop.
No! Please help! No, please help! Anybody, please!
Alan exited my house with his laptop bag. A moment later, he threw it in his truck and he proceeded to back his truck up. Now there's a tire coming straight at me.
Help me! Somebody please help me! Please.
I just thought, my God, he's not gonna run me over, is he?
Stop! You're gonna run over me, Alan! What are you doing? Stop it! Alan, please, I'm your friend! You're gonna run over me, Alan! Stop! No! No, please! Please.
I'm laying there helpless, unable to move out of the way, and I just prayed to God, God, please help me.
No! Please! Oh, no, no!
He ran over my right leg, and he came up right onto my abdomen with the tire. It was practically in my face. He turned his steering wheel and turned the direction of the tire and went completely off of my body, over the side, over my hip. He was trying to kill me, trying to finish me off. And the next thing I know, he backed off down my driveway. He drove off.
Help me!
And I started screaming for help as loud as I could.
Help me! Please!
I could hear a pin drop. Everything was just completely silent. I was gonna die. And I was terrified. I needed to get help right away if I was gonna survive. After a couple of minutes, a vehicle pulled up to my driveway. And I was relieved that somebody had stopped to help me, that they heard my cries for help.
Oh, thank God you're here. Help me, I've been shot.
And the next thing I know, it was him.
No! No, not you! Stay away from me! Stay away from me!
Without a word, he grabbed me by my ankles and he dragged me across my driveway.
Alan, I'm your friend. Please stop. Why are you doing this to me? I'm your friend. Please, Alan.
As he was dragging me, my flesh was tearing. On my elbows, on my back, on my spine.
Why are you doing this to me? Please don't, Alan. Please stop. I'm your friend. Please. Alan, please. Please don't.
Alan obviously thought that she was not going to survive her injuries. He wanted to hide the body. Him just dumping her behind the bushes like trash was his way of doing his deed. And he retrieved the shell casings from the scene, which is an obvious attempt to hide the fact that he had a gun, what type of gun it was, and he left.
Help! Help, please. Help me. Please. Help.
I was so scared that he was going to come back and finish me off. I didn't want to die. That night, I wanted to live. And so I started screaming for help again.
Help! 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 Somebody please! Help! Please help me!
Shot twice, run over by a car, and left for dead in her yard, Christine Kent knows she's running out of time.
I just kept praying to God to please help me. Please, God, let me stay. Let me see my family again. God, please don't take me yet. My work isn't finished here yet.
Help! Please, anybody, please.
I prayed, and then I screamed, and that went on for about 10 minutes.
Please, anybody, please.
And finally, I heard the sirens coming up the street.
When the incident was occurring, neighbors heard the gunshots, but they were too afraid to come out to really look and see what was going on. But they called the police.
I'm here! I'm over here, please! Please, please! I'm over here! Thank God you're here.
Dispatch, we need an ambulance and backup. Can you move it on?
I can't feel my legs. And I can't feel my legs anymore.
Okay, paramedics are on the way.
I said to the paramedics, please, please don't let me die. Don't let me die. And the rest was in God's hands.
But before she gets taken to the hospital, Christine reveals the identity of her would-be killer.
I was still conscious, so I was able to give the police his name and a description of him and his vehicle.
And while Christine clings to life in the ICU, the manhunt for Alan Sinclair begins.
Upon going to Sinclair's house, we searched it. There was no sign of him or his SUV, but his girlfriend was there, and his girlfriend had not seen him since the night before, and she had no idea where he was.
And when one of Alan's neighbors stumbles upon a clue, he notifies police.
Mr. Phillips.
Hey, yeah.
I'm Detective Mellies.
I came out to walk the dog this morning, and I found this on my fence just right over there. Pretty sure it belonged to Alan.
One of Alan's neighbors found a laptop bag hanging on the fence of his house. Inside the laptop bag was a note to his girlfriend, and it appeared as though it was a suicide note.
Do you have any idea where he might have gone?
I didn't really know the guy.
If you find anything else, please give me a call.
Sure, will do.
The Broward Sheriff's Office issued a BOLO form, which goes out to all the agencies around the country, and if they come across him, to notify the Sheriff's Office immediately.
Later that afternoon, police are called to a hardware store in Florida City, 70 miles south of Fort Lauderdale.
Alan was found slumped over his wheel in a parking lot. A passerby saw him, was concerned, and called the police. It was very hot out. They thought that he might have been in trouble, and he had his gun on the seat next to him.
Sir, open the door! Open the door!
Here in South Florida, it gets very hot, especially in the summertime, and you can get temperatures in excess of 100 degrees in cars. It appeared he wanted to commit suicide by sitting in the vehicle, overheating. For Sinclair to try to kill himself by heat exhaustion is very unusual. This is something that happens to children more so than adults when they're left in cars, but it's definitely a way that you can die.
Open the door! Sir, open the door!
He obviously had every opportunity to commit suicide because he had a gun with him. So that tells me that maybe he did want to die, or he just was not thinking clearly.
Don't move!
Just let me die. He immediately stated that he had shot a woman in Fort Lauderdale and he was trying to kill himself. He was taken to the hospital and treated for dehydration.
When police search Alan's car, they uncover even more detailed evidence of Alan's evil plot against Christine.
In the vehicle, the police found what you would call a rape kit. He had duct tape, he had a knife, he had latex gloves, he had condoms. He also had 6 duct fasteners fashioned into handcuffs. It was quite evident that he was going to rape her and kill her. And during the investigation, the sheriff's office detectives found a neighbor who had a video of Sinclair driving into the driveway and also leaving before Christine came home. So he obviously was trying to get a hold of her, stalking her, and the video proved quite valuable. Once Sinclair was found and taken to the hospital, the investigators from Fort Lauderdale responded to his location at the hospital to interview him regarding the incident. There were no triggers. He wasn't fired, he didn't lose a girlfriend, so there was no real reason for him to act out like this and no explanation for his actions. He stayed quiet the whole time, so he did not tell us what his reasoning was and why he committed this crime. Unfortunately, in this case, we have a lot of unanswered questions.
Christine is recovering from emergency surgery when she receives word that Alan is in police custody.
I was told that Alan had been apprehended, and I was so relieved to know that he was caught, because I still felt in fear for my life even while in the hospital.
But Christine is left to face the life-altering consequences of Alan's violent actions.
The surgeons had no idea when I was brought in that in addition to being shot, I had also been run over. They did an emergency surgery to save my life. They cut me open. They had to repair the damage from the bullet. My liver was lacerated in half, and my spleen was ruptured, and I had all kinds of internal bleeding and hemorrhaging. I had a crushing type of injury over my abdomen, my right foot over my right leg, the kneecap, and up on top of my abdomen, where a 2,000 pounds of pressure was turned on top of my body and back off across my right hip and over my wrist. My wrist was broken in multiple places and compound fractures. I had my suspicions I wouldn't be able to use my legs. I was paralyzed, and then the doctors confirmed it. I was told later by the doctors at the hospital that I would never walk again. I always thought that I would heal and I would get better and I would be able to regain my mobility again, be able to walk again, but I've had to come to terms with that. The pain was excruciating the next several weeks, months. It's been years and I'm still in pain every day. It was only through the grace of God that I was able to get through this ordeal.
Alan Sinclair is charged with attempted first-degree murder. He pleads no contest and is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We never found a motive for why he attacked or why he picked Christine. He apologized, but he gave no answers for his actions.
But despite Alan's attempts to destroy her life, Christine's indomitable spirit refuses to break.
It's not easy to get out sometimes, but I do my best to get out and participate in life and have a good time. I've raced in 13 full marathons with the Achilles team, and I felt that After that, like, nothing can keep me down. And I'm just thankful by the grace of God that I survived. Because each and every day is a gift. No matter what life throws your way, you just have to make the best of it.
The afternoon looked painfully ordinary. School had ended. Children spilled onto sidewalks with backpacks bouncing against their shoulders, talking about homework, cartoons, baseball, and what they wanted for dinner. Cars rolled through quiet suburban streets. Parents expected to hear front doors slam open within the hour. Nothing suggested that one small decision, one missed turn of fate, would ignite one of Florida's most horrifying criminal investigations and leave a permanent scar across an entire nation. On September 11, 1995, 9-year-old Jimmy Rice stepped off his school bus in a peaceful neighborhood near Miami. He had made the same trip countless times before. It was a route so familiar that nobody imagined danger lurking between the bus stop and home. His mother expected him to arrive within minutes. His father believed he was safe. His classmates assumed they would see him again tomorrow morning. Tomorrow never came. By nightfall, Jimmy Rice had vanished. No screams. No witnesses rushing to call police.
No abandoned bicycle. No había struggle.
Just silence. It is the kind of silence investigators learn to fear. Children do not simply disappear into thin air. Somewhere between the school bus and his front door, someone had interrupted an ordinary afternoon and transformed it into every parent's worst nightmare. For hours, Jimmy's family searched on their own, believing there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe he had stopped at a friend's house. Maybe he had wandered somewhere unexpected. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. But every passing minute chipped away at those comforting possibilities. Friends had not seen him. Neighbors had no answers. Darkness settled over the streets while panic spread through the Rice household. The first night is often the cruelest. Families cling desperately to hope while investigators quietly calculate probabilities they rarely share aloud. The longer a child remains missing, the worse the statistics become. When law enforcement officially launched the search, officers treated the disappearance with growing urgency. Patrol units canvassed neighborhoods. Detectives knocked on doors. Search teams combed nearby woods, drainage canals, abandoned lots, and every place a frightened child might hide. Volunteers joined the effort almost immediately. Flyers appeared on utility poles, storefront windows, and community bulletin boards. Television stations interrupted regular programming. Newspapers printed Jimmy's smiling school photograph across their front pages. A bright-eyed boy with neatly combed hair had suddenly become the face of a statewide emergency. Every parent who saw the photograph imagined their own child. Every school bus looked different. Every walk home suddenly felt dangerous. Investigators reconstructed Jimmy's final known movements with painstaking precision. Witnesses confirmed he had boarded the school bus after classes ended. The driver remembered dropping him off at his usual stop. Other students recalled seeing him step onto the sidewalk carrying his backpack. After that, nothing. The timeline simply stopped. Detectives examined every possibility. Had Jimmy wandered away voluntarily? Highly unlikely. Children his age rarely vanish without leaving some trace. Had he become injured somewhere nearby? Search teams found no evidence. Could he have been picked up by someone he trusted? That possibility quickly climbed to the top of investigators' concerns. Unlike dramatic television kidnappings filled with screaming and violent confrontations, many real child abductions begin quietly. A familiar face. A convincing lie. A request for help. A promise of candy. An offer of a ride home. Sometimes it takes less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds to erase a lifetime. The FBI joined local authorities as concern intensified. Experienced profilers reviewed every available detail. Detectives interviewed family members repeatedly. Not because they believed the parents were guilty, but because statistics demanded every possibility be examined. Friends, neighbors, teachers, bus drivers, classmates. Everyone connected to Jimmy's life became part of an expanding investigation. Nothing significant emerged. No family conflict.
No custody dispute.
No indication Jimmy planned to run away. No credible sightings that could be confirmed. Meanwhile, thousands of tips flooded police hotlines. Most were well-intentioned. Someone thought they had seen a child matching Jimmy's description at a shopping center. Another reported a suspicious van parked near a playground. Someone else remembered an unfamiliar man asking children strange questions days earlier. Each lead demanded attention. Each required manpower. Each consumed precious hours. Most ended in disappointment. Across Florida, fear spread with astonishing speed. Parents stopped allowing children to walk home alone. Schools reviewed safety procedures. Neighborhood watch groups organized extra patrols. Television anchors repeated Jimmy's photograph daily, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize a crucial detail. The case became impossible to ignore. Behind the scenes, investigators focused on a chilling reality. Child abductions committed by strangers are statistically rare. But when they do occur, time becomes the greatest enemy. Experts understood that the first 48 hours often determine whether a child is found alive. Every decision carried enormous consequences. Search grids expanded farther from the neighborhood. Helicopters scanned wooded areas from above. Mounted officers searched terrain inaccessible to vehicles. Divers checked canals and retention ponds despite having no evidence pointing there. The landscape itself seemed determined to hide answers. Florida's dense vegetation swallowed sound. Thick undergrowth concealed countless locations impossible to search quickly. Every empty field looked suspicious. Every abandoned building demanded inspection. Days passed. Still nothing. Television interviews with Jimmy's family became increasingly heartbreaking. His mother pleaded directly into the camera, begging whoever had taken her son to let him come home. She avoided anger. She avoided blame. Like countless parents before her, she appealed instead to whatever humanity might still exist inside an unknown abductor. If you have Jimmy. The sentence often ended in tears. America watched. America hoped. America waited. Investigators began studying known sex offenders, living within driving distance of the disappearance. Records were reviewed, alibis examined, probation officers contacted, detectives compared vehicle descriptions, employment histories, prior offenses, and geographic patterns. One after another, names were eliminated. Some suspects had solid alibis. Others lived too far away. Several had been incarcerated at the time. The list grew shorter without bringing investigators any closer to Jimmy. Then there were the false confessions. Every major missing child investigation attracts individuals who claim responsibility despite having no connection whatsoever. Some crave attention. Others suffer from severe mental illness. A few simply enjoy manipulating police and grieving families. Detectives learned to separate fantasy from fact. Hours of interviews often produced absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, rumors spread through neighborhoods with frightening speed. Parents whispered about suspicious strangers. Children repeated stories heard from adults. Every unfamiliar vehicle became a potential threat. Every coincidence transformed into speculation. Fear can be as contagious as truth, sometimes even more so. Yet amid the chaos, investigators remained disciplined. They followed evidence, not emotion. Unfortunately, evidence remained painfully scarce. There was no confirmed crime scene, no forensic trail, no eyewitness describing a struggle, no surveillance cameras recording suburban streets in 1995. Today, investigators might analyze doorbell footage, GPS data, mobile phone locations, traffic cameras, digital transactions, and countless electronic records. In 1995, most of those tools simply did not exist. Detectives relied on shoe leather, interviews, maps, instinct, patience, and relentless persistence. Weeks slipped by. Hope began changing shape. At first, volunteers searched believing they would rescue a frightened little boy. Later, they searched because families deserve answers. Those are very different missions. Still, Jimmy's photograph remained everywhere. Gas stations, restaurants, libraries, churches, police stations, convenience stores. Every smiling image silently asked the same unbearable question. Where is Jimmy Rice? The investigation expanded beyond Florida. as national agencies distributed missing person bulletins across state lines. Truck drivers carried flyers from one city to another. Rest stops displayed posters. Toll booths circulated photographs among employees. Airports notified security personnel. Border agencies remained alert. Someone had to know something. Someone had seen something. Somewhere. Detectives refused to believe a child could vanish without another human being noticing. But cases involving calculated predators often expose an unsettling truth. Ordinary people witness extraordinary events every day without realizing their significance. A child entering a vehicle. A man speaking calmly beside the road. A truck parked where it normally isn't. A door opening. A curtain moving. Tiny details disappear inside ordinary routines until investigators ask questions weeks later. Memory fades quickly. Certainty fades even faster. The Rice family lived inside an endless cycle of anticipation and disappointment. Every ringing telephone carried the possibility of life-changing news. Every unexpected knock at the door triggered hope, followed almost immediately by crushing uncertainty. Friends surrounded them. Neighbors organized vigils. Churches held prayer services. Children released balloons into the Florida sky. Yet beneath every act of compassion lingered a terrifying question no one dared ask aloud. What if Jimmy wasn't coming home? Investigators refused to surrender to that possibility publicly, but privately they understood the brutal mathematics of child abduction cases. Survival rates decline rapidly as days become weeks. Every sunrise without answers increased concern. Still, cases have defied probability before. Children have been recovered alive after unimaginable ordeals. Hope, however fragile, remained essential. Then another challenge emerged. Media attention. National coverage helped generate tips, but it also attracted opportunists, conspiracy theories, and misinformation. Every anonymous phone call promising secret knowledge had to be investigated. Every sensational rumor threatened to divert valuable resources. Detectives walked a difficult line between encouraging public involvement and filtering overwhelming noise. The emotional pressure became relentless. Officers assigned to missing child cases often carry invisible burdens long after investigations end. Every unsolved disappearance leaves unanswered questions that refuse to disappear. Every family meeting reminds investigators why failure feels personal. Jimmy's case was becoming exactly that. Personal. Not only for his parents, not only for detectives, but for an entire state. Children now looked over their shoulders while walking home from school. Parents timed bus arrivals down to the minute. Teachers reminded students never to accept rides from strangers, even people who seemed friendly. Neighborhood routines changed almost overnight because one little boy had vanished without explanation. Somewhere beyond the search parties, beyond the television cameras, beyond the endless interviews and growing stacks of investigative reports, the truth already existed. Someone knew exactly what had happened that September afternoon. Someone carried the answers while an entire community searched in the dark. And as another Florida sunset disappeared below the horizon, investigators could not yet know that the breakthrough they desperately needed would not come from a dramatic eyewitness or a miraculous discovery during a search operation, but from an ordinary observation that would eventually unravel one of the state's most horrifying criminal cases and expose a nightmare far darker than anyone had imagined. The investigation refused to slow down, even as the calendar marched relentlessly forward. Detectives filled whiteboards with timelines, maps, and names. Every interview generated another lead. Every lead seemed to dissolve into another dead end. The missing child posters hanging across South Florida had begun to fade under relentless sun and rain, but Jimmy Rice's face remained impossible to forget. His smile stared back from gas station windows, grocery store entrances, and television screens, silently reminding an entire community that somewhere, a 9-year-old boy was still missing. For Jimmy's parents, every sunrise marked another day without answers. Sleep became almost impossible. Every unexpected telephone call triggered hope. Every passing school bus reopened the wound. His empty bedroom remained untouched, frozen in time as if he might walk through the front door at any moment, drop his backpack on the floor, and ask what was for dinner. That moment never came. Behind the scenes, investigators quietly began considering a grim possibility they had hoped to avoid. The absence of ransom demands was significant. Kidnappers motivated by money usually contacted families quickly. There had been no anonymous letters, no recorded phone calls, no instructions, no negotiations. Whoever had taken Jimmy wanted something other than financial gain. That realization dramatically changed the direction of the investigation. The FBI's behavioral experts studied the available evidence, not because they possessed supernatural insight, but because decades of criminal investigations had revealed recurring patterns. Offenders who abduct children often display familiar behaviors. Some carefully plan their crimes. Others act impulsively after spotting an opportunity. Some remain close to the crime scene. Others transport victims considerable distances. Every detail mattered. Jimmy had disappeared during daylight. He had vanished in a familiar neighborhood. There had been no public struggle. Those facts suggested the offender had likely acted quickly and with confidence. Investigators wondered whether the abductor had watched the neighborhood before the crime. Perhaps someone had observed school bus schedules for days or even weeks. Perhaps Jimmy had been selected in advance. Or perhaps he had simply been the first vulnerable child to appear at exactly the wrong moment. The uncertainty haunted everyone involved. Meanwhile, officers revisited the neighborhood again and again, hoping fresh conversations might uncover forgotten details. Human memory is peculiar. A witness may overlook something important during an initial interview, only to remember it weeks later after hearing another person's account or seeing a familiar image. One resident recalled noticing an unfamiliar pickup truck. Another believed they had seen a man standing outside a vehicle near the bus route. Someone else vaguely remembered hearing a dog barking unusually that afternoon. Each fragment sounded promising. None could be conclusively linked to Jimmy's disappearance. The investigation continued expanding in every direction at once. Detectives requested records from utility companies, reviewed employment histories of convicted offenders, examined property ownership records, and compared reports of suspicious activity from neighboring counties. Every known sex offender within practical driving distance underwent renewed scrutiny. Some voluntarily agreed to interviews. Others immediately contacted attorneys. Every reaction was documented. Every inconsistency investigated. Still, nothing directly connected any suspect to Jimmy. Weeks passed with agonizing slowness. The national media intensified its coverage. Television crews broadcast from outside the Rice family home. Crime analysts debated theories during evening news programs. Child safety experts urged parents to teach children new rules about strangers, safe routes, and emergency situations. Jimmy's disappearance had evolved beyond a local tragedy. It had become a national conversation. Communities across America recognized something deeply unsettling. If a child could disappear while walking home in broad daylight from a familiar bus stop, then no neighborhood felt completely immune. Parents changed routines almost overnight. Children who once walked alone now traveled in groups. Some families drove just a few blocks rather than allowing their sons or daughters to walk. Fear reshaped ordinary life. For detectives, however, fear could not replace evidence. Evidence remained painfully scarce. Without surveillance cameras, cell phone location data, or widespread digital records, investigators relied almost entirely upon physical evidence and eyewitness testimony. The problem was that neither appeared to exist in sufficient quantity. The offender had left almost nothing behind. Or so it seemed. As the investigation entered another exhausting phase, detectives began examining reports that initially appeared unrelated. Strange encounters involving children, suspicious vehicles seen near schools, individuals approaching minors under unusual circumstances. Most reports proved innocent. One involved a delivery driver. Another concerned a construction worker asking for directions. Several turned out to be misunderstandings fueled by public anxiety. Yet detectives understood that overlooking one genuine warning could prove catastrophic. Then, hundreds of miles away from the center of media attention, an observation began quietly moving through the machinery of law enforcement. At first, it seemed insignificant, almost forgettable. The kind of information that might normally disappear inside a stack of routine reports. A local resident had noticed unusual activity involving a neighboring property. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obviously criminal. Just behavior that felt wrong. Investigators did not immediately recognize its importance. Only after comparing timelines did the report begin attracting closer attention. Meanwhile, another development occurred. Search warrants were quietly prepared for locations considered worthy of additional examination. Detectives carefully balanced legal requirements against investigative urgency. They could not simply enter private property without probable cause. Every warrant required factual support capable of surviving judicial scrutiny. The process consumed valuable time. Time investigators no longer possessed. The emotional burden weighed heavily on everyone involved. Veteran detectives who had spent decades solving violent crimes admitted privately that missing child investigations affected them differently. Murder scenes, however horrific, usually offered certainty. The victim had been found. Evidence existed. A timeline could be reconstructed. Disappearances were different. Disappearances left investigators chasing shadows. Every unanswered question lingered. Every possibility remained alive until disproven. For Jimmy's parents, uncertainty became its own form of torture. They could neither grieve fully nor celebrate. They lived suspended between hope and despair. Friends tried offering comfort. There were few words capable of helping. Every holiday arrived with an empty chair. Every birthday became another painful reminder of time continuing without their son. Investigators never stopped working. Files multiplied. Interview transcripts filled cabinets. Maps became covered with colored markings showing search areas, witness locations, and investigative priorities. One detective later described the atmosphere as trying to assemble a 1,000-piece puzzle while possessing only a handful of pieces, and no picture on the box. Yet sometimes investigations turn not because of a spectacular breakthrough, but because ordinary people notice ordinary details. That possibility began taking shape when detectives focused attention on a property associated with a man whose background raised immediate concern. His name had not dominated headlines. He had not appeared dramatically on television. He existed quietly on the edges of the investigation. Until now. The man's behavior reportedly struck some observers as unusual. Accounts varied. Some recalled odd conversations. Others mentioned inconsistent explanations. None of those observations individually established guilt. Together, however, they justified deeper scrutiny. Detectives examined his criminal history. What they discovered intensified their interest. Previous allegations involving sexual misconduct had already brought him into contact with the justice system years earlier. While past crimes cannot establish responsibility for a new offense, experienced investigators know that patterns often matter. The investigation accelerated. Officers conducted additional interviews. Surveillance increased. Background records expanded. Neighbors were questioned carefully. The picture remained incomplete. But for the first time in weeks, detectives sensed they might finally be moving toward someone rather than simply searching everywhere at once. The challenge became gathering admissible evidence. Suspicion alone accomplishes nothing inside a courtroom. Facts do. Investigators scrutinized vehicle ownership records, employment schedules, property access, travel history, financial activity. Every document added another tiny piece to an emerging picture. Yet the central question remained unanswered. Where was Jimmy? Without locating the child, prosecutors would face enormous challenges proving what had happened. Law enforcement therefore continued searching aggressively. Ground searches resumed in locations previously considered unlikely. Dense vegetation complicated every operation. Florida's climate rapidly destroys physical evidence. Rain washes away footprints. Heat accelerates decomposition. Wildlife scatters remains. Thick foliage conceals objects only a few feet away. Nature itself became an obstacle. Search teams pushed through swamps, fields, and wooded areas under exhausting conditions. Hope diminished. Determination did not. As public attention intensified, so did pressure on investigators. Political leaders demanded progress. Citizens demanded answers. Journalists demanded updates. Detectives possessed very little they could responsibly disclose. Silence sometimes protects investigations. Unfortunately, silence also fuels speculation. Rumors multiplied again. Some insisted Jimmy had been taken out of state. Others believed an organized kidnapping ring operated throughout Florida. Another theory claimed investigators were hiding major evidence from the public. None of those rumors reflected the known facts. Behind closed doors, detectives concentrated on evidence rather than headlines. The property attracting their attention remained under careful examination. Witness statements became increasingly important. One observation in particular refused to disappear. Someone had reportedly seen a child with an adult connected to that location around the period of Jimmy's disappearance. Initially, the significance had not been recognized. Only later, after seeing Jimmy's photograph repeatedly on television, did the memory acquire devastating importance. Human memory often works that way. Events appearing ordinary at first can become extraordinary once placed into proper context. Investigators moved quickly. Interviews were repeated. Timelines refined. Details compared. Every inconsistency mattered. Every minute mattered. The investigation that had once spread across countless possibilities was slowly narrowing toward a single path. No one involved could yet imagine the horrifying truth waiting at the end of that path. Because if detectives were correct, Jimmy Rice had never left the area voluntarily. He had never wandered away. He had never become lost. He had encountered someone capable of unimaginable violence. And somewhere beyond the reach of television cameras, hidden behind the appearance of an ordinary life, the answers that Florida had desperately sought for weeks were waiting to be uncovered. Answers that would not only explain the disappearance of one little boy, but expose crimes so disturbing that they would permanently change the way America responded to missing children. Detectives had spent weeks chasing possibilities that dissolved into nothing. Entire neighborhoods had been searched. Thousands of interviews had been conducted. Every hour that passed without an answer deepened the fear that Jimmy Rice had not simply disappeared. Someone had made him disappear. Then, almost quietly, the investigation shifted. It did not begin with a dramatic confession or a breakthrough in a forensic laboratory. It began because an ordinary citizen trusted an uneasy feeling. A woman who lived near a rural property in Redland, Florida, contacted investigators after recognizing Jimmy's photograph from the relentless media coverage. She recalled seeing a young boy at a neighboring residence around the same period Jimmy vanished. At the time, nothing about the encounter had seemed extraordinary. The child appeared alive. The adult nearby behaved calmly. But after days of seeing Jimmy's face on television, the memory refused to leave her. Detectives immediately recognized the importance of the tip. Witness memories are fragile. They become less reliable as time passes. Yet this account contained enough specific detail to justify urgent follow-up. Investigators quickly compared dates, locations, and descriptions against information already collected during the previous weeks. One name surfaced with increasing frequency. A man living on the rural property had a criminal history involving sexual offenses. That fact alone proved nothing. Investigators are trained not to confuse prior convictions with present guilt. But when a missing child, an eyewitness account, and a previously convicted offender intersect inside the same timeline, every minute suddenly matters. Law enforcement moved carefully. They could not simply storm onto private property. Every action required legal justification. Search warrants were drafted. Witness statements were reviewed again. Detectives spent long hours ensuring every procedural step could withstand future scrutiny. One mistake could jeopardize an entire prosecution. Behind closed doors, tension continued to build. Experienced investigators often describe moments like these as standing outside a locked door, convinced the truth is on the other side, but unable to open it until every legal requirement has been satisfied. Finally, the warrant was approved. Officers approached the property with extraordinary caution. The land itself seemed isolated from the outside world. Dense vegetation surrounded sections of the property. Dirt roads wound through fields that offered little visibility. Several structures stood scattered across the area, ordinary enough at first glance to avoid attracting attention from passing motorists. Nothing immediately announced the horror investigators feared. Search teams divided responsibilities. Some officers secured the perimeter. Others documented every movement. Crime scene technicians prepared cameras, evidence markers, and collection equipment. The first hours produced more questions than answers. Investigators carefully examined vehicles parked on the property. They searched outbuildings. They photographed interiors before touching potential evidence. Every room was measured, recorded, and preserved. The suspect offered explanations. Some seemed plausible. Others shifted under closer questioning. Detectives noted every inconsistency. Years of interviewing violent offenders had taught them a valuable lesson. People can rehearse lies. Reality rarely needs rehearsal. While investigators continued searching, specialists examined physical evidence with painstaking precision. Fibers, fingerprints, biological material, and trace evidence were collected whenever possible. In 1995, forensic DNA analysis was already transforming criminal investigations, but the technology remained slower and more limited than modern laboratories. Every sample mattered. Every fragment could eventually become decisive. As officers expanded their search outside the residence, attention turned toward areas where disturbed ground appeared inconsistent with the surrounding landscape. Fresh excavation does not automatically indicate criminal activity. Properties are constantly altered. Gardens are planted. Posts are installed. Animals are buried. Investigators understood that appearances alone prove nothing. Even so, certain locations demanded closer examination. Searchers worked methodically. Shovels gave way to hand tools. Photographs documented every stage. Silence settled over the scene. Nobody spoke more than necessary. Veteran investigators recognized the atmosphere. Everyone sensed the investigation was approaching its defining moment. Across Florida, the Rice family remained unaware of developments unfolding miles away. They continued waiting beside telephones, continuing interviews, continuing to hope. Hope can survive astonishing punishment. Parents of missing children often describe living between two impossible worlds. One world insists their child is still alive somewhere, waiting to be rescued. The other whispers the truth they cannot bear to accept. Neither world offers peace. Back at the property, investigators uncovered evidence that fundamentally changed the investigation. The case was no longer being treated solely as a missing person inquiry. It had become a homicide investigation. The discovery devastated everyone involved. The remains located at the property were later identified as Jimmy Rice. For investigators who had spent weeks chasing every possible lead, the confirmation delivered both relief and heartbreak. The search was over. The nightmare was only beginning. Crime scene technicians expanded their work dramatically. Every inch of the property became significant. Measurements multiplied. Evidence markers appeared across the landscape. Photographers documented every angle before anything could be moved. Forensic anthropologists and medical experts worked carefully to preserve evidence that might later explain exactly what had happened. Investigators now faced two equally important responsibilities. The first was identifying every piece of evidence connecting the suspect to Jimmy's death. The second was reconstructing the sequence of events as accurately as possible. Unlike fictional crime dramas, real investigations rarely unfold through dramatic speeches or sudden revelations. They advance through details. Tiny details. A fiber. A fingerprint. A witness statement. A receipt. A timeline. One fact supporting another until speculation gives way to proof. Detectives return to previous interviews armed with new information. Witnesses who had once seemed only marginally important suddenly occupied the center of the investigation. The woman who reported seeing a young boy near the property became one of the most significant witnesses in the case. Without her willingness to contact authorities, investigators might never have focused their attention on the location so quickly. Her decision demonstrated one of the enduring lessons found throughout criminal investigations. Ordinary observations can become extraordinary evidence. Meanwhile, forensic experts continued examining material recovered from the property. Laboratory testing sought to establish scientific connections between Jimmy, the suspect, and the crime scene. DNA analysis, though slower than today's methods, offered investigators increasingly powerful tools. Hair comparisons, biological samples, trace materials. Each examination strengthened the evidentiary picture. Detectives also reconstructed Jimmy's final known movements. Evidence indicated that after leaving his school bus, he encountered the suspect, who persuaded or forced him into a vehicle before transporting him to the rural property. Exactly how the initial contact occurred could never be fully established. That uncertainty continues to haunt the case. Did Jimmy believe he was accepting help? Was he deceived? Threatened? The answers disappeared with the only two people who witnessed the encounter. Investigators interviewed the suspect extensively. His explanations evolved. Inconsistencies emerged. Confronted with mounting evidence, portions of his account changed again. Experienced interrogators understand that truthful accounts generally become more consistent over time. Fabricated stories often require constant revision as new evidence appears. Every contradiction was documented. Every statement compared against physical findings. The investigation revealed an offender who had attempted to conceal his crimes, rather than report an accident or seek assistance. That distinction became profoundly important. Evidence suggested deliberate actions taken after Jimmy's disappearance. For prosecutors, those actions demonstrated consciousness of guilt rather than panic. News of the discovery spread rapidly across Florida. The emotional reaction was immediate. Communities that had prayed for Jimmy's safe return now confronted the unbearable reality that hope had ended. Schools held counseling sessions. Churches opened their doors for grieving families. Neighborhoods organized vigils illuminated by hundreds of candles. Parents embraced their children with unusual intensity. The case ceased being only one family's tragedy. It became everyone's. Journalists gathered outside courthouses and police headquarters seeking confirmation of every new development. Officials remained cautious. Investigations of this magnitude demand precision. Premature announcements can damage prosecutions. Detectives released only verified information. Speculation remained outside official statements. Behind the scenes, prosecutors began preparing for what promised to become one of Florida's most closely watched criminal cases. Every document would face scrutiny. Every forensic conclusion would likely be challenged. Every witness would require careful preparation. Justice depends not merely upon knowing the truth but proving it beyond reasonable doubt. The evidence collected from the property would become the foundation of that effort. Yet even as investigators organized exhibits and laboratory reports, another painful realization settled across the investigative team. Jimmy Rice could not be brought home alive. Nothing accomplished afterward could change that. Every successful prosecution in a murder case contains an unavoidable tragedy. The legal system can establish responsibility, cannot restore what has been taken. As investigators packed evidence into carefully labeled containers destined for forensic laboratories, the property itself stood silent once again. The fields looked unchanged. The buildings appeared ordinary. Passing strangers would have seen nothing remarkable. But beneath that ordinary landscape lay the truth that an entire state had searched desperately to uncover. The mystery of Jimmy Rice's disappearance had finally been answered. What remained was ensuring that the evidence, painstakingly gathered piece by piece, would withstand every challenge inside a courtroom and reveal, in full, the horrifying chain of events that transformed an ordinary walk home from school into one of Florida's most infamous crimes. The discovery of Jimmy Rice ended one mystery, but it opened another far more demanding challenge. Investigators no longer needed to determine whether a crime had occurred. That question had been answered in the most devastating way imaginable. Now they faced the task that often decides whether justice succeeds or fails. Transforming grief into evidence, suspicion into proof, and a horrifying sequence of events into a case capable of surviving every legal challenge. The property in Redland remained sealed behind crime scene tape as forensic specialists continued documenting every possible detail. Nothing was considered insignificant. A single hair trapped in fabric. A partial fingerprint on a smooth surface. Soil transferred from one location to another. Every item was photographed, measured, labeled, and preserved according to strict procedures. The reason was simple. Defense attorneys would eventually examine every step investigators had taken. One mistake in collecting evidence could cast doubt over an otherwise overwhelming case. Crime scene technicians moved with deliberate precision. They avoided shortcuts. Every photograph included scales for measurement. Every sample was sealed in separate containers to prevent contamination. Chain of custody forms accompanied every piece of evidence from the moment it was collected until it reached the forensic laboratory. To outsiders, the process appeared painstakingly slow. To experienced investigators, it was essential. The truth inside a courtroom depends not only on what evidence exists, but on whether prosecutors can prove that evidence remained untouched, properly documented, and scientifically reliable. Meanwhile, detectives focused on reconstructing the hours following Jimmy's disappearance. The timeline began with certainty. Jimmy had attended school. He had boarded his school bus. He had exited at his normal stop. From there, investigators relied on witness testimony, forensic findings, and the suspect's own inconsistent statements to assemble the final chapter of the child's life. Each verified fact narrowed the remaining gaps. Investigators determined that Jimmy had been transported from the neighborhood, where he disappeared, to the rural property several miles away. The distance explained why the massive search operation around his home had failed to locate him. Search teams had concentrated where logic suggested a lost child might remain. The offender had removed Jimmy from that entire environment before anyone realized he was missing. It was a chilling reminder of how quickly an abduction can overwhelm even the fastest emergency response. Minutes matter. Distance matters. Opportunity matters. Once a victim is moved to a secluded location, every passing hour dramatically complicates rescue efforts. Detectives also examined the suspect's movements before and after September 11th. Receipts, employment records, witness interviews, and vehicle activity became crucial pieces of the puzzle. They sought to establish not only where he had been, but whether his actions revealed planning rather than coincidence. Premeditation often leaves subtle traces. A sudden deviation from routine. An unexplained absence. Attempts to avoid observation. Small details rarely attract attention individually. Together they can reveal intent. As investigators interviewed acquaintances, neighbors, and former co-workers, a portrait of the suspect slowly emerged. Those who knew him offered sharply different impressions. Some described him as quiet and reserved. Others recalled unsettling interactions that had seemed insignificant until Jimmy disappeared. That contradiction is common in violent criminal investigations. Many offenders maintain an outward appearance of normalcy. They hold jobs. They greet neighbors. They attend social gatherings. The extraordinary violence hidden beneath an ordinary exterior often shocks those who believed they knew them. Detectives carefully separated opinion from fact. Rumors could not become evidence. Character assessments alone could not prove guilt. Only verifiable information entered the investigative record. Forensic scientists, meanwhile, worked through an expanding collection of laboratory submissions. Biological evidence underwent DNA analysis. Trace materials recovered from clothing and objects were examined under microscopes. Specialists compared fibers, hairs, and other microscopic evidence capable of linking people, places, and objects together. In the mid-1990s, DNA science had already begun reshaping criminal justice, but each analysis required patience. Results did not arrive overnight. Laboratories processed evidence carefully, knowing every conclusion could later become the subject of intense courtroom scrutiny. Investigators waited. Then the reports began arriving. Piece by piece, the scientific findings reinforced the conclusions already emerging from witness testimony and physical evidence recovered at the property. Independent forms of evidence began pointing toward the same conclusion. That convergence is one of the strongest foundations in criminal investigations. Witnesses can make mistakes. Physical evidence can be misunderstood in isolation. But when multiple independent sources support the same sequence of events, the overall picture becomes far more compelling. As prosecutors reviewed the growing case file, they recognized its significance. This was not merely another homicide prosecution. Jimmy Rice's disappearance had become one of the most closely watched criminal cases in Florida. Public attention remained intense. News organizations requested daily updates. Parents continued asking difficult questions. How had this happened? Could it have been prevented? Was the offender acting alone? Investigators answered only what evidence supported. Speculation remained outside official statements. The emotional burden extended far beyond the Rice family. Many detectives assigned to the investigation had children close to Jimmy's age. Every photograph inside the evidence file reminded them of that reality. Experienced officers often learn to separate emotion from procedure while processing crime scenes. That separation becomes far more difficult when the victim is a child. Some investigators later acknowledged privately that Jimmy's case stayed with them long after each workday ended. The images, the interviews, the unanswered what-if questions. Those burdens rarely disappear. As preparations for prosecution accelerated, detectives conducted additional interviews with the suspect. Interrogations rarely resemble dramatic television confrontations. They are often long, methodical conversations in which investigators compare statements against known evidence, looking for contradictions, omissions, and changes in narrative. Consistency matters. Truth generally remains stable. Fabricated accounts often evolve. The suspect's explanations continued shifting as investigators confronted him with new evidence. Certain details changed. Others disappeared entirely. Some statements conflicted directly with established facts. Each inconsistency strengthened prosecutors' confidence that the evidence would withstand legal scrutiny. Still, investigators remained cautious. Confessions alone are not enough. History contains too many examples of false admissions obtained through confusion, coercion, or mental illness. Experienced prosecutors therefore seek corroboration. Every important statement must align with independently verified evidence whenever possible. In Jimmy's case, detectives believed the physical evidence provided exactly that support. The investigation also prompted renewed examination of the suspect's past. Authorities reviewed previous criminal records, searching for patterns that might illuminate investigative decisions. Some earlier encounters with law enforcement revealed troubling behavior. Those prior offenses had already demonstrated the potential danger he posed. Yet the criminal justice system had eventually returned him to society. That realization sparked uncomfortable conversations across Florida. Could earlier intervention have prevented Jimmy's death? Could warning signs have been recognized sooner? Those questions would continue long after the trial ended. They also influence future debates about monitoring convicted sexual offenders, community notification laws, and child protection policies. For Jimmy's family, however, political discussions offered little comfort. Their focus remained deeply personal. They had entered September believing they were raising an energetic 9-year-old boy with an ordinary future ahead of him. Within weeks, that future had vanished forever. The ordinary routines of family life became permanent reminders of absence. Birthdays, school photographs, holiday traditions. Each carried the weight of someone missing. Grief after homicide differs from many other forms of loss. Families are forced to process not only death, but deliberate violence. They search endlessly for reasons where none can truly satisfy. Why this child? Why that day? Why their family? No courtroom can answer those questions. Outside the courthouse, reporters continued interviewing child safety experts. Many emphasized that stranger abductions remain statistically uncommon compared with other dangers facing children. At the same time, Jimmy's case demonstrated how catastrophic the consequences become when such crimes occur. Schools strengthened safety education. Parents revised family rules. Communities encouraged children to travel together whenever possible. The investigation had already begun changing public behavior. As prosecutors finalized charging documents, another enormous responsibility loomed ahead: presenting the case before a jury. Jurors would not experience the investigation as detectives had. They would not spend weeks reviewing thousands of pages of reports. Instead, prosecutors needed to transform months of investigative work into a clear, logical narrative supported by credible witnesses and scientifically sound evidence. Every exhibit had to serve a purpose. Every witness had to explain a piece of the puzzle. Every fact had to build toward proof beyond reasonable doubt. Across Florida, people waited for that day. Many believed the evidence already seemed overwhelming. Others reserved judgment until hearing testimony inside the courtroom. That restraint lies at the heart of criminal justice. Investigations seek truth. Trials test whether the evidence proves it. As the courthouse prepared for proceedings that would draw national attention, the detectives who had spent countless hours searching neighborhoods, interviewing witnesses, and processing the rural property understood they had reached another critical threshold. The search for Jimmy Rice had ended. The search for justice was only beginning. The courthouse became the next battlefield. Months earlier, detectives had searched fields, neighborhoods, and canals, hoping to find a missing child alive. Now every search map, every interview transcript, every laboratory report, and every carefully preserved piece of evidence would be tested under the unforgiving scrutiny of a courtroom. The objective had changed, but the stakes remained just as high. This time, the question was no longer where Jimmy Rice had gone. The question was whether prosecutors could demonstrate, beyond a reasonable doubt, what had happened and who was responsible. Long before the first witness took the stand, attorneys on both sides were preparing for a legal fight that would command national attention. Prosecutors organized thousands of pages of investigative records into a coherent narrative supported by physical evidence, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. Defense attorneys examined every report with equal intensity, searching for inconsistencies, procedural errors, or unanswered questions that might create reasonable doubt. That is how the justice system is designed to function. Every major criminal case is tested, challenged, and examined from every possible angle before a verdict is ever reached. For Jimmy's family, however, legal procedure offered little emotional relief. Each hearing forced them to relive the worst weeks of their lives. Each photograph introduced into evidence reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Each witness who described the investigation reconstructed moments they desperately wished had never existed. Yet they attended, day after day, because they wanted to hear every fact. Not every rumor. Not every headline. The facts. As jury selection began, attorneys faced a unique challenge. Jimmy's disappearance had received extensive media coverage throughout Florida and across much of the United States. Finding jurors who had never heard about the case proved nearly impossible. Instead, the court focused on selecting individuals who could set aside prior impressions and evaluate only the evidence presented inside the courtroom. The responsibility placed upon jurors in cases involving violent crimes against children is extraordinary. Emotion is inevitable. Sympathy is unavoidable. Yet the law requires decisions to rest upon evidence rather than outrage. Opening statements reflected that balance. Prosecutors outlined the sequence investigators believed the evidence established. They described Jimmy's ordinary school day, his disappearance after leaving the school bus, the extensive search that followed, the witness observations that redirected the investigation, and the evidence recovered from the rural property. Rather than relying upon dramatic language, they emphasized the consistency between witness testimony, physical evidence, and forensic findings. The defense reminded jurors that accusations, even serious ones, are not proof. They urged careful examination of every witness and every scientific conclusion. They questioned assumptions. They challenged interpretations. They argued that the burden of proof rested entirely with the prosecution. The trial had begun. One by one, witnesses entered the courtroom. Teachers described Jimmy as an ordinary 9-year-old, whose disappearance stunned everyone who knew him. The school bus driver recounted the routine afternoon route, and the moment Jimmy exited the bus at his usual stop, neighbors explained how quickly concern spread once Jimmy failed to arrive home. Search coordinators detailed the enormous effort undertaken during the following days. Maps displaying search areas were introduced into evidence. Photographs documented locations investigators had examined. Telephone records illustrated the flood of tips received from across Florida. Together, these witnesses established an unmistakable reality. Jimmy had not simply wandered away. Something had interrupted an otherwise ordinary walk home. Detectives then took the stand. Their testimony was measured and methodical. They explained how investigators constructed the timeline, verified witness statements, and gradually narrowed the focus of the investigation. Rather than presenting dramatic conclusions, they described each investigative step exactly as it occurred. One lead generated another. One interview suggested another witness. One observation led investigators toward the rural property. The process appeared almost ordinary when described chronologically. Yet jurors understood that behind every procedural decision lay weeks of uncertainty and relentless effort. Among the most important testimony came from the witness whose observation helped redirect investigators. She described seeing a young boy on the neighboring property during the critical period surrounding Jimmy's disappearance. At the time, the site had not appeared suspicious enough to report immediately. Only after repeatedly seeing Jimmy's photograph in newspapers and television broadcasts did she realize the possible significance of what she had witnessed. Her testimony demonstrated an important truth about criminal investigations. Critical evidence does not always appear dramatic in the moment. Sometimes it exists quietly inside someone's memory, until later events reveal its importance. Crime scene investigators followed. Using photographs, diagrams, and laboratory reports, they explained how evidence had been documented, collected, packaged, and preserved. Jurors heard about chain-of-custody procedures designed to ensure every item remained secure from collection through forensic examination. The presentation lacked theatricality. Instead, it emphasized precision. Every photograph had been taken for a reason. Every measurement served a purpose. Every evidence tag represented another carefully documented step. Forensic scientists explained laboratory analyses using language understandable to jurors without scientific backgrounds. Biological evidence, trace materials, and other physical findings were described in detail. Rather than asking jurors to accept conclusions based solely upon authority, prosecutors guided expert witnesses through the scientific methods underlying each opinion. The cumulative effect proved significant. Individual pieces of evidence rarely tell an entire story. Combined, they can reveal a compelling sequence of events. Defense attorneys responded with vigorous cross-examination. They questioned witness recollections. They explored limitations in forensic testing. They examined investigative decisions made during the early days of the search. Could memories have faded? Could certain interpretations be challenged? Were investigators influenced by hindsight after discovering the property? Such questions are not unusual. They form an essential part of the adversarial legal process. Each challenge required prosecutors to reinforce the reliability of the evidence through additional testimony and documentation. The jury observed not merely what investigators believed had happened, but how those conclusions had been reached. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, media attention remained intense. Satellite trucks lined nearby streets. Journalists summarized each day's testimony for viewers who had followed the case since Jimmy first disappeared. Parents across America continued watching closely. For many families, the trial represented more than one criminal prosecution. It represented an attempt to understand how such a tragedy could unfold in an ordinary neighborhood on an ordinary afternoon. Throughout the proceedings, Jimmy's absence remained the most powerful presence inside the courtroom. His school photographs appeared repeatedly during testimony. Witnesses spoke his name with remarkable consistency. Jurors learned about his routines, his family, and the ordinary childhood interrupted forever. Unlike fictional courtroom dramas, no dramatic revelation suddenly transformed the case. The evidence accumulated gradually. One witness strengthened another. One document confirmed another. Scientific findings reinforced eyewitness accounts. The investigation's strength rested not upon a single decisive moment, but upon the convergence of independent evidence pointing toward the same conclusion. By the time prosecutors rested their case, jurors had listened to weeks of testimony detailing the investigation from the first missing person report through the execution of search warrants, forensic examinations, and witness interviews. Defense counsel continued presenting arguments designed to challenge the prosecution's interpretation of that evidence. Every inconsistency, however small, received careful attention. Every unanswered question was highlighted. The court reminded jurors repeatedly that they alone would determine which evidence deserved credibility. As closing arguments approached, both sides sought to bring months of testimony into focus. Prosecutors argued that the evidence formed one consistent narrative supported by witness observations, forensic findings, and investigative documentation. The defense urged jurors to remember that certainty requires proof beyond reasonable doubt, not emotion or public opinion. The courtroom fell silent. The evidence had been presented. The witnesses had spoken. The investigators had explained their work. Soon 12 jurors would retire behind closed doors, carrying the immense responsibility of deciding one of Florida's most closely watched criminal cases. For Jimmy's parents, the wait felt painfully familiar. Months earlier they had waited beside telephones, hoping for news that their son would come home. Now they waited once again, this time for justice rather than rescue. Nothing could return the little boy who had stepped off his school bus on an ordinary September afternoon. Nothing could erase the fear that had spread through communities across Florida. Nothing could restore the childhood that had ended far too soon. But the legal process was approaching its final chapter, and within the quiet deliberation room beyond the courtroom doors, the evidence collected through countless hours of investigation would soon be weighed against the highest standard the law demands. The jury disappeared behind closed doors, carrying boxes of exhibits, stacks of instructions, and the weight of a decision that would forever shape the final chapter of Jimmy Rice's case. Outside the deliberation room, the courthouse settled into an uneasy silence. Attorneys reviewed notes they would no longer present. Reporters waited for even the smallest sign of movement. Family members sat quietly, measuring time not in minutes but in heartbeats. The investigation had taken months. The trial had consumed weeks. The verdict would take far less time to announce than it had taken to build. Inside the jury room, emotions were expected, but emotion alone could not decide the case. Jurors were instructed to examine only the evidence admitted during trial. They revisited witness testimony, reviewed photographs, and discussed forensic findings. They compared timelines established by investigators with the physical evidence presented in court. One question guided every conversation. Had the prosecution proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt? That standard exists for a reason. It does not require absolute certainty. It requires proof strong enough that reasonable alternatives are no longer persuasive when measured against the evidence. As deliberations continued, the Rice family remained together. Their lives had already been permanently altered months earlier. Whatever verdict emerged would not change the empty bedroom waiting at home. It would not restore birthdays that had been missed or erase memories of endless days spent searching for a child who never returned. Justice, they understood, is not the same as healing. Sometimes it is simply the closest society can come. When the jury finally reached a unanimous decision, word spread through the courthouse almost instantly.
Cour personnel notifie d'Atornay.
Deputies prepared the courtroom. Reporters hurried back inside. Spectators filled every available seat. The atmosphere felt different from earlier proceedings. There were no whispered conversations.
No rustling papers.
Only anticipation. The jury entered. Each juror avoided looking toward the gallery. The verdict form was handed to the judge. After confirming that every procedural requirement had been satisfied, the clerk began reading the decision aloud. The defendant was found guilty. For Jimmy's family, the words marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Relief and grief often exist together after a verdict. The legal system had recognized what investigators believed the evidence proved. Yet the verdict did not lessen the absence that had defined their lives since September 11, 1995. Across the courtroom, prosecutors remained composed. Experienced trial attorneys understand that conviction is never a moment for celebration. A successful prosecution means that a violent crime has been proven, not that tragedy has been undone. The sentencing phase followed. The court considered the gravity of the offenses, the evidence presented during trial, and the applicable laws governing punishment. Prosecutors argued that the crime represented one of the most serious acts imaginable. Defense counsel presented arguments permitted under the law, asking the court to consider every legally relevant factor before imposing sentence. After reviewing the record, the court imposed the sentence prescribed under Florida law. The case, from a legal perspective, had reached its conclusion. For investigators who had worked tirelessly since Jimmy disappeared, the verdict validated months of painstaking effort. Every interview, every search warrant, every laboratory submission, every carefully documented crime scene photograph had contributed to the outcome. But when the courtroom emptied, few detectives described feeling victorious. Most spoke instead of satisfaction that Jimmy's family finally had answers. That distinction mattered. Police officers investigate crimes to establish facts. They cannot restore what violence has taken away. In the weeks that followed, public attention shifted beyond the individual prosecution toward broader questions of public safety. How could communities better protect children? Could existing laws be strengthened? Were dangerous offenders being adequately monitored after release? Those questions reached lawmakers in Florida. Jimmy's case became a powerful catalyst for legislative debate. Public officials, child advocates, prosecutors, law enforcement leaders, and victims' families all participated in discussions about preventing similar tragedies in the future. Those conversations eventually contributed to the creation of what became known as the Jimmy Rice Act, legislation designed to provide a legal process for the civil commitment of certain sexually violent predators who were determined, through judicial proceedings, to pose a continuing danger after completing their criminal sentences. Supporters viewed the law as an important public safety measure intended to reduce the risk posed by individuals assessed as highly dangerous. Critics raised concerns about civil liberties and the constitutional implications of continued confinement after completion of a criminal sentence. Those debates continue in legal and academic circles today. Regardless of differing views, there was little disagreement about one point. Jimmy Rice's death had fundamentally changed the conversation surrounding child protection in Florida. His name became associated not only with tragedy but with legislative reform. Law enforcement agencies also reviewed investigative procedures developed during the search. Although many of today's systems did not exist in 1995, Jimmy's case reinforced the importance of rapid coordination among local police, state investigators, federal agencies, schools, and community volunteers. Technology would later transform many aspects of missing child investigations. Digital surveillance expanded. Cell phones became nearly universal. DNA analysis grew faster and more sophisticated. License plate readers, geographic information systems, and electronic databases significantly increased investigators' ability to reconstruct movements and identify suspects. Yet experienced detectives often emphasize that technology alone does not solve cases. People do. Witnesses who come forward. Neighbors who notice unusual activity. Officers who refuse to abandon difficult investigations. Families who continue searching despite overwhelming despair. Jimmy's case illustrated each of those realities. One citizen's memory became critically important. One investigative lead redirected an entire case. One carefully executed search warrant uncovered the truth. Years later, the story continued appearing in documentaries, books, training seminars, and discussions among criminal investigators. Not because the case contained extraordinary forensic breakthroughs or cinematic detective work, but because it demonstrated how ordinary routines can be shattered in moments. Jimmy had done nothing unusual that afternoon. He simply left school, boarded his bus, stepped off at the familiar stop, began walking home. The routine millions of children complete every school day. That ordinary sequence made the crime especially haunting. It reminded communities that danger sometimes appears without warning, disguised beneath the appearance of normal life. The Rice family devoted significant effort to preserving Jimmy's memory, encouraging child safety awareness and supporting initiatives intended to protect other families from similar suffering. No public advocacy can erase personal loss, but many families choose to transform unimaginable grief into efforts that may help others. Their work became part of Jimmy's enduring legacy. For the investigators who had first responded to a missing child report in September 1995, certain memories never faded. The first frantic phone calls, the volunteers gathering before sunrise, the endless stacks of missing person flyers, the growing realization that every hour mattered. The moment evidence finally pointed toward the rural property. Those experiences remained with them long after retirement. Many later reflected that Jimmy's case reinforced a lesson taught in every major investigation. Persistence matters. Cases that appear hopeless can change because one witness remembers something overlooked, because one detective asks another question, because one lead receives one more day of attention. The answers rarely arrive dramatically. They emerge piece by piece. Today, decades after Jimmy disappeared, the case remains one of the defining child abduction investigations in Florida's history. It is remembered not only for the devastating crime itself, but also for its influence on public policy, investigative practices, and national awareness of child safety. The smiling photograph that once appeared on thousands of missing child posters has become part of that history, not as a symbol of fear alone, but as a reminder of why every missing child report demands immediate action, why investigators continue searching when hope begins to fade, why communities respond so quickly when a child fails to come home. Because behind every photograph is a family waiting beside a telephone, believing that somewhere, somehow, there is still time. Jimmy Rice never had the chance to finish the walk home that September afternoon. His story, however, did not end at the place where investigators uncovered the truth. It continued in courtrooms, in legislative chambers, in police academies, and in the countless conversations between parents and children about staying safe. And in that sense, although the investigation reached its conclusion, the lessons left behind continue to shape how future generations respond when the unthinkable happens and a child simply fails to come home. Long after the courtroom emptied and the television cameras packed away their equipment, Jimmy Rice's case refused to disappear from the public consciousness. Most criminal trials end with a verdict. This one became the beginning of something much larger. Across Florida, police departments quietly revisited their procedures for responding to reports of missing children. Detectives who had participated in the investigation gathered with colleagues to examine every decision made during those critical first hours. The objective was not to assign blame. It was to identify lessons. Could search areas have been expanded sooner? Could agencies have shared information more quickly? Were there investigative techniques that might improve future responses? Every major case becomes a classroom. The most painful investigations often produce the most enduring changes. Veteran detectives understood one uncomfortable truth better than anyone else. When Jimmy disappeared in 1995, law enforcement operated in a world fundamentally different from today. There were no smartphones silently recording movements, no doorbell cameras capturing passing vehicles, no social media capable of spreading photographs across millions of screens within minutes, no GPS history stored inside mobile devices, no automatic license plate readers documenting traffic. Investigators relied on interviews, paper maps, physical searches, telephone calls, human memory. Every lead required officers to drive, walk, knock on doors, and speak face-to-face with witnesses. The absence of modern technology did not reflect a lack of effort. It reflected the reality of the era. Many investigators later wondered how differently the case might unfold if the same disappearance occurred today. A school bus might be equipped with digital cameras. Nearby homes might provide surveillance footage. Traffic intersections could capture passing vehicles. Mobile phone records could help reconstruct movements. Electronic transactions might establish timelines within minutes rather than weeks. Yet technology creates only opportunities. Someone must still recognize what matters. Someone must still ask the right questions. Someone must still pursue the truth. Jimmy's investigation demonstrated exactly that. The breakthrough did not originate from advanced machinery. It came because an ordinary citizen trusted a memory that seemed insignificant until viewed through the lens of a missing child investigation. That lesson continues appearing in police training programs across the country. Small observations matter. Report what seems unusual. Do not assume someone else already has. One overlooked detail can redirect an entire investigation. The case also reshaped conversations about sexual predators living within communities. Before the mid-1990s, many Americans understood little about the long-term risks posed by repeat sexual offenders. Criminal records often remained difficult for ordinary citizens to access. Neighborhood awareness varied dramatically. Parents generally relied upon instinct rather than information. Jimmy's case intensified demands for greater transparency and stronger monitoring of offenders considered particularly dangerous. Those debates eventually contributed to broader public discussions, extending well beyond Florida. Questions emerged that remain relevant today. How should society balance public safety with constitutional rights? What level of supervision best protects communities? Can violent sexual offenders truly be rehabilitated? Should communities receive additional information about individuals with serious criminal histories? There are no universally accepted answers. Courts, lawmakers, researchers, victims' advocates, civil liberties organizations, all continue examining those questions decades later. Jimmy's name became part of those conversations, not because legislation could change what had happened, but because policymakers hoped future tragedies might be prevented. Meanwhile, investigators archived the enormous case file. Evidence boxes were sealed. Photographs were cataloged. Interview recordings joined thousands of pages of reports. The investigation itself had ended. Its historical value had not. Police academies occasionally referenced the case while teaching new investigators about child abduction response. Not as an example of dramatic detective work, rather as an illustration of persistence. Searches continued despite discouraging results. Witnesses were re-interviewed repeatedly. Evidence was collected methodically. Every investigative step built upon the previous one. There were no shortcuts. There was no miracle. Only disciplined police work supported by citizens willing to come forward. Years passed. Children who had seen Jimmy's photograph on television became adults with families of their own. Many remembered exactly where they were when the story dominated national news. Some recalled parents refusing to let them walk home alone afterward. Others remembered classrooms discussing stranger safety with unusual seriousness. For an entire generation, Jimmy's disappearance transformed abstract warnings into something painfully real. It also changed how schools approach student safety. Many districts strengthened dismissal procedures. Parents updated emergency contact information more frequently. Teachers received additional guidance regarding children who failed to arrive home as expected. Bus transportation policies evolved. Community awareness campaigns expanded. Each improvement represented another effort to reduce opportunities for future offenders. Investigators often describe prevention as the greatest success a criminal case can achieve. The cases that never happen leave no headlines. No television coverage.
No courtroom testimony.
Only ordinary afternoons continuing exactly as families expect. For Jimmy's parents, however, ordinary life would never return. Grief changes shape over time. It rarely disappears. The sharp shock of sudden loss eventually becomes quieter, but it remains present in birthdays, anniversaries, and unexpected moments when memory arrives without warning. Parents who lose children often describe living two parallel lives. One is the life they continue living. The other is the life they imagine their child would have experienced. Graduations never attended. Careers never begun. Families never created. Every passing year becomes another reminder of possibilities permanently erased. Despite unimaginable loss, Jimmy's family chose not to allow his name to exist only inside police files and courtroom records. His memory became associated with advocacy, awareness, and efforts intended to protect other children. Many families confronted by violent crime eventually reach similar decisions. They cannot rewrite their own history. They hope someone else's history may unfold differently. That hope carries remarkable strength. Criminal investigations often conclude with sentencing. Real life rarely does. Communities continue asking questions. Researchers continue analyzing offender behavior. Law enforcement continues refining investigative strategies. Technology continues advancing. Each generation inherits lessons written by cases like Jimmy's. The landscape where investigators searched has also changed over the decades. Roads have expanded. Buildings have appeared. Neighborhoods have grown. People drive past locations connected to the investigation without realizing the history beneath familiar surroundings. Time alters geography. It cannot erase memory. Among detectives, Jimmy Rice's investigation remains remembered for another reason. It demonstrated the emotional cost carried by those responsible for investigating crimes against children. Officers assigned to homicide units often develop remarkable resilience. Yet many acknowledge that cases involving children affect them differently. The photographs remain vivid. The interviews linger. Certain voices never fade. Some investigators later admitted they still remembered the first missing person bulletin bearing Jimmy's smiling school portrait. Others recalled the overwhelming silence at the crime scene once the search reached its heartbreaking conclusion. Those memories become permanent companions. The public rarely sees that burden. Television usually ends when the verdict is announced. Real investigators continue carrying the case long afterward. As decades passed, advancements in forensic science solved many older cold cases across America. DNA recovered years earlier suddenly identified unknown offenders. Genealogical databases opened investigative paths previously unimaginable. Families finally received answers after waiting generations. Jimmy's case did not become famous because it remained unsolved. It became significant because it demonstrated how determined investigative work, witness cooperation, and forensic evidence could eventually establish the truth despite overwhelming uncertainty during the earliest days. Today, child abduction investigations begin differently because of lessons learned through tragedies like this one. Amber Alerts distribute information within minutes. National databases coordinate agencies across state lines. Digital photographs spread instantly. Public awareness develops rapidly. Entire communities can mobilize before the first search party even gathers. Every improvement reflects decades of accumulated experience. Many of those improvements were shaped by families whose suffering forced difficult questions into public view. Jimmy Rice was one of those children. He never chose to become a symbol. He never imagined his name would appear in legislative debates, police training manuals, academic discussions, and public safety campaigns. He was simply a 9-year-old boy walking home from school. That ordinary beginning remains the most haunting part of the story. Because evil rarely announces itself. It appears without warning. In familiar places. On familiar afternoons. When everyone believes the routine will continue exactly as it always has. And perhaps that is why Jimmy's case continues resonating decades later. Not because it revealed something extraordinary about crime, but because it exposed something profoundly ordinary about trust. A child trusted the world enough to begin walking home. A family trusted that routine would protect him. A community trusted that danger belonged somewhere else. The investigation shattered those assumptions forever. Yet from that heartbreak emerged stronger investigative practices, broader public awareness, and a renewed commitment shared by parents, teachers, neighbors, and law enforcement alike. Every child deserves to reach home safely. Every missing child report deserves immediate action. Every witness deserves to know that even the smallest observation may one day become the missing piece that brings the truth into the light. Jimmy Rice's journey ended on a September afternoon in 1995. The responsibility his story placed upon the rest of society continues to this day. Time has a way of softening headlines. The urgent breaking news banners disappear. Television crews move on to the next story. Newspapers replace yesterday's tragedy with today's crisis. Streets that once filled with search volunteers return to ordinary routines. Children grow older. Neighborhoods change. Seasons pass almost unnoticed. But some cases refuse to fade. Jimmy Rice became one of them. Years after the investigation ended, detectives who had worked the case could still recall specific moments with remarkable clarity. Not because they had memorized reports, but because certain memories resist the passage of time. The first missing person call. The desperate urgency in his family's voices. The endless search maps spread across conference tables. The volunteers refusing to stop despite exhaustion. The uneasy realization that every hour without progress made the outcome increasingly uncertain. Police officers often develop emotional distance as a survival mechanism. They must. Without it, few could endure careers spent investigating violence, death, and unimaginable suffering. Yet cases involving children often penetrate even those carefully constructed emotional barriers. Many investigators later acknowledged that Jimmy's photograph remained with them long after the case closed. Not because of the crime scene. Because of the smile. It represented everything that had been stolen. Across Florida, Jimmy's disappearance became part of the collective memory of an entire generation. Adults who had once been elementary school students themselves remembered classroom discussions that followed his disappearance. Teachers interrupted ordinary lessons to remind children about personal safety. Never accept rides from strangers. Stay with friends when walking home. Tell an adult immediately if something feels wrong. Simple advice. Repeated countless times. Yet after Jimmy's disappearance, those lessons carried entirely different weight. Children who previously viewed such warnings as abstract suddenly understood that real families experience these nightmares. Parents changed as well. Many began driving children only short distances they had once walked alone. Bus stops became gathering places where adults waited instead of watching from inside their homes. Neighbors paid closer attention to unfamiliar vehicles. Communities learned to notice details previously ignored. One unfamiliar car. One unusual conversation. One unexpected visitor. Sometimes awareness itself becomes a form of protection. Law enforcement agencies also continued examining the investigation from every possible angle. Not because they believed major mistakes had occurred. Rather, because every serious case offers opportunities to improve future responses. Investigators analyzed timelines, communication procedures, search coordination, evidence collection, interagency cooperation. Each review asked essentially the same question. If another child disappeared tomorrow, how could the response become even faster? Those discussions helped shape training for future generations of detectives. The earliest hours of a missing child investigation became recognized as uniquely critical. Delay can never be recovered. Every decision made during the opening hours influences everything that follows. Modern investigators often receive specialized instruction, emphasizing immediate action rather than cautious waiting. Search immediately. Interview immediately. Preserve evidence immediately. Notify partner agencies immediately. The philosophy reflects decades of accumulated experience, much of it learned through heartbreaking cases like Jimmy's. Meanwhile, advances in forensic science transformed criminal investigations across America. When Jimmy disappeared in 1995, DNA analysis already existed but remained comparatively slow and limited. Laboratories processed evidence using methods considered groundbreaking for the era. Today, those same laboratories possess capabilities investigators of the mid-1990s could scarcely imagine. Touch DNA, rapid DNA processing, advanced biological analysis, digital crime scene reconstruction, three-dimensional mapping, high-resolution forensic imaging. Each technological advance strengthens the ability to identify offenders and reconstruct events. Still, experienced investigators continue repeating one important reminder. Technology supports investigations, does not replace them. A laboratory cannot examine evidence never collected. A computer cannot interview witnesses. Software cannot recognize the significance of human behavior without investigators interpreting what they observe. Jimmy's case demonstrated that truth emerges through the combination of science, persistence, and ordinary people willing to speak. The witness who remembered seeing a young boy near the rural property could easily have dismissed the memory. She did not. That decision altered the course of the investigation. It remains one of the most important reminders within criminal justice. Never underestimate what appears insignificant. Investigators also studied offender behavior revealed during the case. Understanding criminal patterns serves an essential purpose. Not to sensationalize violence. Not to glorify offenders, but to recognize warning signs capable of preventing future crimes. Behavioral specialists emphasize that many violent offenders attempt to appear ordinary. They maintain jobs, converse politely, blend into communities. The contrast between public appearance and private behavior often shocks neighbors after an arrest. Jimmy's case reinforced that uncomfortable reality. Danger does not always resemble popular stereotypes. It frequently hides behind familiarity. For Jimmy's parents, however, broader lessons never replace personal loss. Every interview conducted after the trial reflected remarkable dignity, despite unimaginable grief. Rather than seeking revenge through public statements, they repeatedly focused attention on protecting other children. That choice earned widespread respect. Many families confronted by violent crime eventually become advocates. Not because advocacy heals grief. Nothing can. They continue because helping another family avoid similar suffering becomes one meaningful way to honor those they lost. Jimmy's name gradually became associated with child protection initiatives throughout Florida. Schools, community organizations, and public safety campaigns referenced his story carefully, emphasizing awareness without exploiting tragedy. The objective remained prevention. not fear. Experts consistently reminded parents that stranger abductions remain statistically uncommon. Most children safely return home every day. Millions of ordinary school afternoons conclude exactly as families expect. Maintaining perspective matters. Exaggerated fear can produce unnecessary anxiety without improving safety. Preparedness, however, is different. Preparedness encourages awareness while preserving normal childhood experiences. Investigators hoped Jimmy's story would inspire exactly that balance. Be alert. Stay informed. Trust instincts. Report suspicious circumstances. But avoid assuming every unfamiliar face represents danger. Effective public safety depends upon reason rather than panic. As years became decades, documentaries and investigative programs revisited Jimmy's case. Unlike fictional crime stories, responsible examinations focused on verified facts. The evidence. The investigation. The legal proceedings. The lasting reforms. Those elements mattered far more than speculation. Unanswered questions inevitably remained. No investigation reconstructs every minute with complete certainty. Some details disappeared forever. Exactly what words were exchanged during Jimmy's initial encounter with his abductor. His thoughts during those terrifying moments. Questions that only the victim and offender could ever fully answer. Those mysteries remain beyond the reach of evidence. Responsible investigators acknowledge such limits. The known facts are powerful enough. They require no embellishment. The case also influenced discussions within journalism itself. Reporters covering missing child investigations increasingly recognize the importance of balancing urgency with accuracy. Premature conclusions can mislead investigations. Rumors spread rapidly. Speculation often overwhelms verified information. Jimmy's disappearance illustrated why careful reporting matters during active investigations. Public assistance proves invaluable. Public misinformation can become a serious obstacle. Even today, retired investigators occasionally speak about the emotional burden carried by missing child cases. Unlike investigations where victims are immediately located, disappearances force officers to imagine countless possibilities, while families wait in agonizing uncertainty. Every incoming tip carries hope. Every false lead brings disappointment. Every passing day deepens anxiety. Jimmy's investigation followed that painful pattern until evidence finally revealed the truth. Although heartbreaking, certainty ultimately allowed both investigators and family members to move from searching toward accountability. Not closure. That word rarely satisfies families after homicide. Rather certainty. Knowing what happened. Knowing who was responsible. Knowing the legal process had reached its conclusion. Those distinctions matter. Today, Jimmy Rice's story stands among the defining child abduction investigations in American criminal justice history. Not because it remains unsolved, not because of dramatic courtroom moments, but because it changed how communities think about missing children. It reminded investigators that persistence matters. It reminded witnesses that memories matter. It reminded parents that ordinary routines deserve thoughtful attention. Most importantly, it reminded society that every missing child report represents far more than a police file. Behind every case number is a family counting minutes. Behind every photograph is a child whose future deserves protection. Behind every investigation stands a community hoping that this time, somehow the ending will be different. Jimmy Rice never reached home that September afternoon. The walk should have lasted only a few minutes. Instead, it became part of criminal justice history. His story continues not because people refuse to let go of the past. It continues because remembering the past helps shape a safer future. Every improved investigative protocol, every child safety lesson, every parent who decides to walk to the bus stop, every witness who chooses to report something that feels out of place. Those quiet decisions rarely appear in headlines. Yet they may become the unseen legacy of one little boy, whose journey home changed the way an entire nation thinks about protecting its children. Years have a way of transforming crime scenes into ordinary places. Grass grows where investigators once stood for hours. Buildings are repaired, repainted, or replaced. Roads become busier. Trees grow taller. New families move into neighborhoods without realizing that decades earlier, those same streets had been flooded with police cruisers, television trucks, and volunteers carrying flashlights into the night. The physical evidence of tragedy slowly disappears. The memory does not. For many people across Florida, September 11, 1995, remains more than a date on a calendar. It is remembered as the afternoon when a routine walk home shattered the comforting belief that familiar neighborhoods were automatically safe simply because they were familiar. Jimmy Rice was not hiking through remote wilderness. He was not traveling alone across another state. He was walking home from school. That ordinary fact continues to make the case deeply unsettling. Criminologists have often pointed to cases like Jimmy's when discussing what they call the illusion of normality. Human beings naturally assume that routines provide security. We drive the same roads, shop at the same stores, walk the same sidewalks. Familiarity gradually convinces us that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. Most of the time it does. Sometimes it does not. Investigators understand this reality better than most. Every major criminal investigation begins with an ordinary day, an ordinary family, an ordinary schedule. Then, in a matter of minutes, everything changes. Looking back at Jimmy's investigation, one of its defining characteristics was not sophisticated technology or extraordinary luck. It was persistence. Thousands of investigative hours produced only small fragments at first. A bus stop. A timeline. Interviews. Search grids. Witness statements. Nothing dramatic. Nothing conclusive. Yet those fragments eventually connected. Experienced detectives often compare investigations to assembling a mosaic. Viewed individually, each piece appears insignificant. Only after enough pieces are placed together does the larger image emerge. Jimmy's case became an almost textbook example of that principle. No single witness solved the crime. No single forensic result explained everything. No single detective uncovered every answer. Instead, dozens of investigators, forensic specialists, prosecutors, witnesses, and community members contributed different pieces until the truth became impossible to ignore. The public often imagines criminal investigations as moments of sudden revelation. Reality is rarely so dramatic. Truth usually arrives gradually, one verified fact at a time. The case also demonstrated another important lesson. Patience and urgency must exist together. That combination may sound contradictory. It is not. Investigators must move urgently because time destroys evidence, fades memories, and reduces opportunities to locate victims. At the same time, every investigative conclusion must be reached patiently. Assumptions can ruin cases. Speculation can misdirect resources. Evidence, not instinct, must determine the next step. Jimmy's investigation reflected that balance. Searches began immediately. Interviews expanded rapidly. Yet detectives resisted announcing conclusions unsupported by evidence. That discipline ultimately strengthened the prosecution when the case reached court. Another enduring aspect of the investigation involved the role of community cooperation. Law enforcement agencies possess considerable resources. They cannot observe everything. Communities extend investigators' eyes and ears. Neighbors notice unfamiliar vehicles. Store employees recognize unusual customers. Teachers remember conversations. Children mention details adults overlook. The witness who came forward after recognizing Jimmy's photograph did not possess specialized training. She simply trusted her memory enough to contact authorities. Without that decision, investigators might have required significantly more time to identify the critical property. Perhaps they eventually would have. Perhaps not. That uncertainty illustrates why public participation remains indispensable. Even decades later, investigators encourage citizens to report observations rather than dismiss them. Not every report proves significant. Some prove essential. Jimmy's story also influenced how missing child cases are communicated to the public. In the years following the investigation, emergency notification systems expanded dramatically. Rapid information sharing became a central priority. Photographs could now circulate within minutes rather than days. Law enforcement agencies developed stronger partnerships with broadcasters, transportation authorities, and neighboring jurisdictions. Modern alert systems owe much to lessons learned from numerous tragic cases throughout the United States. Jimmy's became one of the most frequently discussed in Florida. Yet despite technological progress, experienced detectives continue emphasizing something surprisingly simple. People still solve crimes. Technology merely helps them do it faster. Behind every DNA report stands a scientist. Behind every interview stands a detective. Behind every emergency alert stands someone making decisions under extraordinary pressure. Human judgment remains central. That reality became especially apparent during Jimmy's investigation. The detectives assigned to the case worked long hours under intense public scrutiny. Media attention brought valuable public awareness, but it also increased pressure. Every news conference generated expectations. Every day without answers invited criticism. Every investigative decision risked being questioned before the full picture became known. Such pressure accompanies many nationally recognized investigations. Professional investigators learned to focus on evidence rather than headlines. Jimmy's case demanded exactly that discipline. The emotional impact extended far beyond law enforcement. Teachers who had known Jimmy struggled to explain his disappearance to frightened classmates. School counselors spent weeks helping children process fears many had never considered before. Parents found themselves answering questions without satisfying answers. Could this happen here? How do we know someone is safe? Why would anyone hurt a child? Some questions have no explanation capable of easing fear. Adults answered as honestly as they could. They emphasized safety, awareness, communication. But they also recognize that absolute certainty does not exist. That realization remains one of the most difficult aspects of parenthood. You prepare. You teach. You protect. You hope. Jimmy's family continued carrying a burden impossible for most people to imagine. Public attention eventually diminished, but personal grief never follows media schedules. Anniversaries returned every year. Birthdays arrived. Holidays passed. Each occasion reminded them of what should have been. Families affected by homicide often describe grief as changing rather than ending. The pain becomes quieter, less visible, never absent. Through advocacy and public awareness efforts, Jimmy's name became connected not only with tragedy but with prevention. His story encouraged conversations that otherwise might never have occurred. Children learned practical safety strategies. Parents discussed emergency plans. Communities strengthened neighborhood communication. Schools refined dismissal procedures. None of those measures could rewrite history. Collectively, they might influence the future. Criminal justice scholars sometimes distinguish between solving crimes and learning from crimes. The first serves accountability. The second serves prevention. Jimmy's case accomplished both. It identified the offender responsible. It also forced institutions to evaluate how children could be better protected moving forward. Even now, investigators occasionally revisit the case while training new officers. Not because the evidence remains disputed. Rather, because the investigation illustrates enduring principles. Document carefully. Interview thoroughly. Follow evidence objectively. Treat every witness respectfully. Never dismiss apparently minor observations. Above all, remember that every case file represents real people living through unimaginable circumstances. The paperwork matters. The family matters more. Visitors to police museums or law enforcement training centers sometimes encounter historical case files that shaped investigative practice. Jimmy Rice's investigation belongs among those influential cases. It stands beside others that altered procedures, inspired legal reform, and reshaped public understanding. Its importance extends beyond Florida. It became part of a broader national effort to improve responses to missing children. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the entire story lies in its simplicity. There was no elaborate conspiracy, no international manhunt, no hidden criminal organization. Just an ordinary school day interrupted by one violent decision. The distance between routine and catastrophe proved frighteningly short. That is why the case continues resonating decades later. Not because it is difficult to understand, because it is impossible to forget. A smiling 9-year-old boarded a school bus expecting to return home. His parents expected to hear the front door open before dinner. His classmates expected to see him in school the next morning. Those expectations were shared by thousands of families every single day. Jimmy's story reminds us that ordinary moments deserve extraordinary attention. A missed arrival home. A backpack that never reaches the kitchen floor. A parent glancing repeatedly through the front window. Small moments can become life-changing warnings. Investigators who worked the case often reflected that every missing child report should be treated as though time itself is evidence. Because in many ways it is. Minutes disappear. Memories fade. Opportunities close. Every second matters. Jimmy Rice's walk home lasted only moments. Its consequences have lasted decades. His name remains woven into Florida's legal history, law enforcement training, child protection efforts, and the memories of countless families who followed the investigation in real time. Some stories fade because the public eventually forgets. Others endure because forgetting would mean losing the lessons purchased at an unimaginable cost. Jimmy Rice's story belongs to the second category, not simply as a record of a crime, but as a lasting reminder that vigilance, compassion, careful investigation, and community responsibility remain among the strongest defenses society possesses when the safety of its children is at stake. Long after the court records were archived and the evidence boxes were sealed, the story of Jimmy Rice continued to echo through places that had never known him personally. Police academies referenced the investigation. Criminal justice classrooms analyzed the timeline. Child safety organizations cited the case while explaining why the first hours of a disappearance are treated with such urgency. Journalists revisited the investigation whenever another missing child case captured national attention. The case had become more than history. It had become a reference point. Investigators often say that every major case leaves behind two legacies. One belongs to the victim. The other belongs to the profession. Jimmy's legacy lived through the memory of a little boy whose future ended far too soon. The investigative legacy lived through procedures refined because of what detectives learned during those difficult weeks in September 1995. Looking back, the chronology appears almost painfully straightforward. A school day ended. A child stepped off a bus. Minutes passed. Then uncertainty. Panic. An enormous search. A painstaking investigation. A trial. A conviction. Years of reflection. But anyone who has worked a real missing child investigation knows that the experience never feels straightforward while it is unfolding. At every stage, investigators faced uncertainty. When Jimmy failed to arrive home, no one knew whether he was injured, frightened, lost, or being held somewhere against his will. When search teams expanded into surrounding neighborhoods, no one knew whether they were looking in the correct direction. When detectives received thousands of public tips, no one knew which, if any, contained the truth. Even after attention focused on the rural property, investigators still needed evidence capable of surviving the highest legal standard. The certainty that history now provides did not exist for those living through the investigation. That distinction matters. It reminds us that criminal investigations are not solved by hindsight. They are solved one careful decision at a time. One aspect of Jimmy's case continues to resonate strongly among experienced detectives. There was no dramatic mistake that suddenly exposed the offender. There was no cinematic chase through crowded streets. No anonymous informant delivering a complete confession. Instead, progress emerged through disciplined investigative work supported by ordinary citizens. That pattern reflects the reality of many successful homicide investigations. Persistence often proves more valuable than spectacle. Throughout the years, researchers studying child abductions have examined cases like Jimmy's to better understand offender behavior, victim selection, and investigative response. Those studies contributed to improved training, risk assessment, and coordination between agencies responsible for protecting children. The purpose has never been to sensationalize tragedy. It has always been prevention. Every lesson extracted from a past investigation represents another opportunity to reduce future harm. Law enforcement agencies across the United States gradually strengthened partnerships with schools, transportation officials, prosecutors, forensic laboratories, and community organizations. Missing child investigations increasingly became multidisciplinary efforts rather than isolated police operations. Jimmy's investigation illustrated why such coordination matters. Every organization possessed different information. Every participant contributed different expertise. Together, those pieces created a far more complete picture than any agency could have assembled alone. Technology has continued evolving at remarkable speed. Today, investigators can access resources unavailable during the mid-1990s. Digital surveillance, cellular location analysis, advanced DNA techniques, rapid electronic communication, sophisticated geographic mapping, artificial intelligence capable of organizing vast quantities of investigative information. Yet experienced investigators consistently repeat the same caution. Technology cannot replace judgment. A surveillance camera may capture a vehicle. Someone must recognize its importance. DNA may identify an individual. Someone must understand how that evidence fits within the broader investigation. Computers process information. People establish meaning. Jimmy's case remains a powerful example of that principle. Beyond law enforcement, the investigation influenced families in quieter ways. Parents who followed the case often changed daily routines without ever discussing the reason publicly. Some walked children to bus stops for years afterward. Others established family passwords for emergency pickups. Many taught children how to respond if approached by an unfamiliar adult. Those conversations became part of ordinary parenting. Children who grew up during the 1990s often remember those lessons without realizing precisely which cases inspired them. For Jimmy's classmates, however, the memory carried unique weight. Their childhood became divided into two periods. Before Jimmy disappeared. After Jimmy disappeared. The difference between those two worlds could never be measured solely by calendars. It altered how an entire generation viewed safety, trust, and the ordinary routines surrounding school. Teachers also experienced lasting effects. Educators occupy a unique position in every community. They witness children arriving each morning and leaving each afternoon. Jimmy's disappearance reinforced how quickly responsibility shifts from school to family, and how vulnerable that transition can become. Many schools strengthen dismissal procedures and communication systems in response to cases like this one. Again, no single policy guarantees safety, but every improvement narrows opportunities for harm. Journalists who covered the investigation later reflected on another lesson: the enormous influence of public attention. Media coverage generated thousands of tips. It also spread rumors. Responsible reporting required careful balance, providing enough information to encourage public assistance without compromising the investigation or fueling speculation. Jimmy's case remains an important example in discussions about crime reporting ethics. Accuracy matters. Timing matters. Words matter. Families living through unimaginable tragedy deserve facts rather than sensationalism. For investigators, the emotional impact often lingers long after retirement. Police officers spend careers moving from one investigation to another. Many cases gradually blur together. Certain cases never do. Child victims frequently remain unforgettable. Years later, retired detectives still remembered the first missing person bulletin bearing Jimmy's photograph. Some recalled standing beside search volunteers before sunrise. Others remembered the silence that settled over the rural property once investigators realized the search had reached its heartbreaking conclusion. Those memories rarely disappear. They become part of the people who carried them. Criminal justice professionals sometimes speak about the invisible archive. It is not stored inside filing cabinets. It exists within the memories of investigators, prosecutors, forensic scientists, emergency dispatchers, and victim advocates. Every difficult case adds another chapter. Jimmy Rice occupies a permanent place within that archive. His story continues teaching lessons to people who never met him. That may be the most enduring form of legacy. Not fame. Not headlines. But influence. Influence upon how investigators search, how communities respond, how parents prepare, how institutions improve. As the years continued passing, new generations encountered Jimmy's story through documentaries, academic research, and discussions about child protection. Many learned about him decades after the crime itself. To them, the investigation belonged to history. To those who lived through it, the emotions remained immediate. History has a peculiar quality. It compresses months of uncertainty into a few paragraphs. It summarizes enormous investigations in only a handful of pages. Yet behind every sentence lies countless hours of work. Every interview required patience. Every search demanded effort. Every forensic examination required scientific precision. Every courtroom appearance reflected months of preparation. Jimmy's case was never simply one investigation. It was thousands of individual decisions connected by a common purpose. Find the truth. Hold the responsible person accountable. Protect future children whenever possible. Those objectives guided everyone involved. Today, if someone drives through the neighborhoods connected to Jimmy's story, nothing immediately announces what happened there decades ago. Children still board school buses. Parents still wait near front windows. Neighbors still wave to one another across driveways. Life continues. That continuation is both comforting and sobering. Communities heal. They also remember. Perhaps that is why Jimmy Rice's story continues to endure. Not because it represents the most complicated criminal investigation in American history. Not because it introduced revolutionary forensic techniques. But because it revealed how quickly ordinary life can be interrupted and how determined investigators, supported by vigilant communities, can still uncover the truth even when hope appears to be fading. His name remains inseparable from the lessons learned after one ordinary September afternoon. Lessons written not in textbooks first, but in the tireless efforts of detectives, the courage of witnesses, the resilience of a grieving family, and the determination of an entire community that refused to stop searching until the truth was finally brought into the light. Every investigation ends. Every report is eventually filed. Every courtroom eventually falls silent. Even the largest stacks of evidence are boxed, labeled, and carried into secure archives where they may remain untouched for years. But some stories refuse to stay inside those boxes. The story of Jimmy Rice is one of them. Decades have passed since a 9-year-old boy stepped off a school bus expecting to walk only a short distance home. Time has transformed neighborhoods, advanced forensic science, and changed nearly every aspect of criminal investigation. Children who once watched Jimmy's photograph appear on the evening news are now parents themselves. Some have children older than Jimmy ever had the chance to become. Yet the central question that haunted Florida in September 1995 still echoes whenever another child is reported missing. How could something so devastating happen during such an ordinary afternoon? Perhaps that question has no perfect answer. Crime rarely follows logic. It interrupts it. The power of Jimmy's story lies not in mystery anymore. The facts of the investigation are now part of the public record. The offender was identified, prosecuted, convicted, and sentenced. The legal process reached its conclusion according to the evidence presented in court. And yet, justice and closure are not the same thing. Courts can determine responsibility. They cannot restore birthdays. They cannot replace empty chairs at dinner tables. They cannot return school photographs that were never taken, graduations that never happened, or futures that disappeared in a single afternoon. For Jimmy's family, the calendar continued moving forward. Years passed. The world changed. Technology advanced. But grief does not measure time the way calendars do. Certain dates remain permanently frozen. September 11th would never again be an ordinary day. Every anniversary would reopen memories that never truly disappeared. This is the hidden reality behind every homicide investigation. When television coverage ends, families continue living with consequences that receive no headlines. Investigators understand this better than most. Many detectives who spend careers solving violent crimes admit that they remember child victims differently. Names fade. Addresses blur. Individual cases gradually merge together. But some faces remain unmistakable. Jimmy's smiling school photograph became one of those faces. Not because investigators failed, but because they never forgot why the work mattered. Police officers often describe homicide investigations as promises. promises made to people who can no longer speak for themselves, a promise to search carefully, a promise to document truth honestly, a promise not to surrender simply because a case becomes difficult. Jimmy's investigation demanded exactly those promises. And those promises were kept. The search continued when hope grew thin. Witnesses were interviewed again and again. Evidence was examined repeatedly. Every legal safeguard was respected. Every important conclusion rested upon evidence capable of surviving the highest standard of proof. That discipline became one of the investigation's greatest strengths. In the years that followed, Jimmy's case continued shaping conversations far beyond Florida. Law enforcement agencies refined missing child response protocols. Legislators debated public safety measures. Researchers studied offender behavior and victim selection. Schools strengthened safety education. Parents developed new routines. Many of those changes occurred quietly, without headlines, without ceremonies, without public recognition. That is often how meaningful change happens. One policy revised. One training program improved. One family deciding to meet a child at the bus stop. One witness choosing to report suspicious behavior, rather than assuming someone else will. Those seemingly ordinary decisions rarely appear remarkable. Collectively, they save lives. There is another lesson hidden within Jimmy's story. It concerns memory. Criminal investigations depend upon memory more than many people realize. The memory of a witness. The memory of an investigator reviewing reports late into the night. The memory of neighbors recalling unfamiliar vehicles. The memory of families refusing to let their loved ones be forgotten. Memory preserves truth long after physical evidence has been catalogued. Without memory, history becomes vulnerable to distortion. That is why responsible true crime matters. Not because tragedy should entertain. Not because violence deserves fascination. But because careful, factual storytelling preserves lessons that future generations may need. Jimmy Rice deserves to be remembered as more than a victim. He was a child.
Asson.
A classmate. A boy who loved ordinary things. A child who boarded a school bus expecting another normal afternoon. That humanity should never disappear beneath legal documents or investigative summaries. It is easy to remember famous cases only through court decisions and newspaper headlines. Far more difficult and far more important is remembering the person at the center of those headlines. Every missing child poster represents someone's entire world. Every evidence photograph represents a family waiting for answers. Every case file carries hopes, fears, birthdays, and dreams impossible to summarize inside official reports. Jimmy's story reminds us of that reality. Today, investigators possess tools unimaginable in 1995. Digital surveillance records daily life. DNA technology continues solving cases once considered impossible. National databases allow agencies to exchange information within seconds. Emergency alerts reach millions of mobile phones almost instantly. These advancements have transformed criminal investigation. But technology alone cannot create compassion. It cannot replace determination. It cannot decide that one more interview is worth conducting. One more search is worth organizing. One more witness deserves another conversation. People make those decisions. And people made them throughout Jimmy's investigation. Looking back now, perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the case is not simply that investigators ultimately uncovered the truth. It is that so many individuals refused to stop searching before they did. Police officers, federal agents, crime scene specialists, laboratory scientists, prosecutors, volunteers, neighbors, teachers, journalists committed to factual reporting, and one witness whose memory proved more important than she could ever have imagined. Each played a role. None could have completed the investigation alone. That collective effort remains one of the defining characteristics of the case. Justice is rarely the achievement of one person. It is built through countless acts of professionalism, integrity, and persistence. As another generation grows up, Jimmy Rice's name continues appearing in law schools, police academies, investigative seminars, and discussions about child safety. Not because anyone wishes to relive the tragedy, because forgetting the lessons would dishonor those who suffered through it. History does not exist merely to document the past. Its greatest purpose is preparing the future. Every missing child investigation that begins today benefits, in some small way, from lessons learned through cases like Jimmy's. Every detective receiving specialized training. Every officer responding immediately rather than waiting. Every coordinated search effort. Every improved forensic procedure. Every emergency alert. Those developments were shaped by countless investigations, each contributing another piece of knowledge. Jimmy's was among the most influential. Perhaps that is the quiet legacy left behind after the headlines faded. A little boy whose life ended far too soon helped change how communities, investigators, lawmakers, and families respond when another child fails to come home. That legacy cannot erase tragedy. Nothing can. But it can give purpose to memory. And memory, when transformed into action, becomes one of society's most powerful safeguards. So when the final page of the case file is closed, when the courtroom lights are switched off, when another year passes on the calendar, Jimmy Rice's story does not truly end. It lives every time a parent waits at a bus stop instead of watching from a distance. It lives every time a child remembers a safety lesson taught at school. It lives every time a witness decides to make one important phone call. It lives every time investigators refuse to abandon a difficult case simply because the trail has grown cold. The walk home that began on an ordinary September afternoon lasted only a few minutes. Its impact has lasted for decades. Not because of the darkness that interrupted it, but because so many people chose to answer that darkness with determination, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. And perhaps that is how Jimmy Rice should ultimately be remembered. Not only as the little boy whose disappearance shocked Florida, but as the child whose story helped reshape the way a nation searches, investigates, and protects its children, ensuring that behind every missing person report, every photograph, and every desperate call for help, there will always be people prepared to keep searching until every possible answer has been found.